good afternoon from the UK, and good evening perhaps to some of the areas of the world, some of the countries of the world who are watching from Far East, Bangladesh, India, and perhaps good morning to our audiences who are watching from America, Canada, or Latin America. A warm welcome to today's wonderful session of talk and reading. Through this session, we will try to give a critical discourse on Latin American literature, like I mentioned, through some insightful talk and most obviously from reading. Reading by some contemporary poets who have already joined now and who will be joining at different phases of this session. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the Granthi is one of the leading platforms here in the UK that promotes global literature. It was quite South Asian centric platform. To be honest, it was quite Bengali literature centric platform, but now it is quite a global platform that promotes the magnificence of global literature, global philosophy. And as part of this vision, Granthi hosts the Granthi International Poetry Festival, which is a live event, happens here in London. And then during this COVID, Granthi started a phenomenal, a groundbreaking initiative to connect poets from all different corners of the world. And that session was called 100 Poets Around the Globe for Love. So now the Granthi is concentrating on the promotion of the literature, the beauty of the literature of different continents, of different languages. As part of this initiative, this session, which is called Latin American Literature, and this session, and then after this session, you will see Granthi will be contemplating on African literature, European literature, and some sessions on different languages to offer you the horizon of different literatures and philosophies. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us introduce our panelists today. Like I mentioned, we invited some contemporary poets, contemporary writers from Latin America, and also invited a couple of speakers from Bangladesh and India, just to let you know how profoundly Latin American literature influenced the poets and writers of Indian subcontinents. So let me introduce our panelists today. But before I talk about our panelists, this is a humble request to all of our audiences. Please share this live streaming to your timeline so that your friends can watch it. This is important, actually. If you find it good for yourself, if you find it beneficial for yourself, if you find it educational for yourself, I'm sure your friends will find it too. So this is streaming live from the Granthi's page, and this is a request to our speakers as well. Those who have a Facebook account, please do share so that your followers can join. And please leave your comments, please leave your questions, please leave your suggestions in the comment box. So this is streaming live from the Granthi's page, and it will be available in our other pages and groups very soon. In the meantime, if I also can share this in my timeline. Just excuse me, I'm just going to do it for myself now, so that those who follow me, they can share from my account. And oh, great, this is available in my account, so please do share from that. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our guests today. We have Tapodhir Bhattacharjee. Most of you are familiar with his writings, and especially he's quite a regular face in the Granthis initiatives, Granthis work. So Tapodhir Bhattacharjee is a prominent literary theorist, a poet, and an essayist, and a public intellectual. So Tapodhir, a warm welcome to today's session, and many, many, many thanks for joining. If you kindly unmute Tapodhir, you are muted at this moment, so kindly unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you, Kaisar, for inviting me to such a galaxy of participants here. In fact, it's a rare opportunity for me to see the world literature through the eyes of some very eminent persons who are present here today. Thank you once again.
Great. We have Carlos Reyes Manzo, a wonderful Chilean poet and a socialist, which is very important to me, a staunch socialist poet who met Pablo Neruda physically, and perhaps he was equally influenced by Pablo Neruda's socialism. Carlos, many thanks for joining as part of this session, my friend, and a warm welcome. If you kindly unmute yourself, Carlos, you are muted at this moment. If you kindly unmute, you are muted.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, exactly. I can.
Brother, you are my comrade, and you are the comrade of the people of Neruda. And that's where we are meeting. That's in the mind and the spirit of Neruda. And Neruda, it was a universal. And that is the way we see poetry, universal. With everybody in the world have the same dream where we can construct a society free of greed, exploitation, and suffering. That's where my poetry comes from.
Carlos, let me salute you, not because you write phenomenal spectrum of poetry, but also because your commitment to socialism, your commitment of standing against inequalities, injustices. And let me salute you again for the phenomenal works you've been doing. Thank you for joining, my friend. We also have a friend, a very powerful poet from Bangladesh, and a phenomenal essayist, and a grand admirer of Latin American literature, Sajjad Sharif. Many thanks, Sajjad Bhai, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Let me convey my heartiest greetings to every poet from Latin, so that we are celebrating just from yesterday, 50th anniversary of our independence. You know, we went for liberation war, and 3 million people were killed throughout the 9 months war. And let me tell you also that one of your finest editor, Victoria Ocampo, a very close friend of Rabindranath Tagore, our he is the poet of Bengalis. She stood beside us in 1971 and tried to make conscience of the world for our cause. So I am conveying my regards from our countryman, from our, the whole nation to you, the Latin American, poets. Ocampo was the editor of Sur, Sur, the South.
Many thanks, Sajjad Bhai. Enrique is a great fan of this relationship. I'm sure he has researched on that historical relationship between Tagore and Victoria Ocampo. And I can remember, Enrique, you sent me the film, the wonderful film that was made on that historical relationship between Tagore and Victoria Ocampo. So, Enrique, many thanks, Enrique Gonzalez, Albites, an academic and assistant professor of Spanish literature from North Colorado University, and a very good friend of us, a fiction writer, poet, and an essayist. Many thanks, Enrique, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Agnes, thank you, Shamin, thank you, everybody here. Effectively, yeah, I studied a lot of the connections between Victoria Ocampo, Gabriel, and Tagore, where when he visited Argentina, early in the 1920s. And I'm very happy to share my input and my literature and also my comments of what is Latin American literature, and what is we celebrated today. Thank you, Atme.
Many thanks, Enrique. Again, we also have Eric Shilander, a friend of us. Those who show those musical activities, especially the promotion that you have been doing for Indian classical and Western and global music, actually. They know Eric quite closely. Is quite familiar face for live events hosted by Saudha from the day one, actually, about 12 years ago. We started that historic journey. So many thanks, Eric. Eric is a Schubert vocalist, an actor, and a poet, and a photographer as well. Many thanks, Eric, for joining again.
Thank you very much. This brings together so many strands, not just from things I've done. And for many years, I've sung much more of the troubadours that were a Romance language than anything else. And there was an influence actually on Spanish literature. And Lorca went over to Argentina and Uruguay in 1933-34, gave his full lecture on Cante Jondo. I lived in Saudi Arabia for a while when my mother was teaching, seeing Arabic architecture there, then in Spain, and then I went for 2 months doing archaeological studies in Peru. And in Lima, you see these, the buildings that are en Trujillo, influenced by Spanish and Arabic. It's all, so interwoven. When I was a child, I was brought up with American folk songs, Pete Seeger singing Spanish with a bad accent, but with lots of heart, and Spanish Civil War songs of later Victor Jara, and so the lots of threads that go to my heart, passing through South America. I'm very pleased to be here and to be with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. And we have Luis Gonzalez Barrios, an academic and a poet. Many thanks, Luis, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Well, good afternoon and evening, everybody, and good morning here in the US. And thank you, Ahmed, for hosting this event, and thank you to the Ronthi, to Enrique Bernales that invited me, to Gabi Sambucetti from La Ninfa Echo, and to everybody in the panel. I would say I'm a poet, but I don't write poetry. I just see the world with poetic eyes. But I'm not a good writer in terms of writing poetry, but I have the poetical view, that's for sure. And I teach.
Yeah, but we will explore your own take on Latin American literature, because you are the professor of Latin American literature, Spanish literature, actually. So
Yes.
we look forward to have your input on this. So
Okay.
let us start. Gabriel Sambusiti, a wonderful friend of us, a British Argentine poet, and the director, the founder of La Ninfa Echo, and we have done so many collaborations together. Many thanks, many thanks, Gaby, for your wonderful support, and many thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Look forward to witnessing your poetry reading soon again.
Thank you.
So let us start with a bit of reading. Perhaps, Eric, if you kindly start with, why not Pablo Neruda? Let's start with Neruda, and then we'll move on to the contemporary panelists. The panelists who will talk on perhaps their writing and Latin American literature as a whole. Before you start reading from Pablo Neruda, I would like to say Didi Champing wrote, hello everyone, many thanks for joining. Shreya Bahirat said, it's great to be familiar with wonderful panel. John Funden, a poet and a playwright, a wonderful friend of us, wrote, what a great panel, looking forward to it. Many thanks, John, for your support as usually, and please continue watching. Okay, Eric Schillender.
I do not love you. I do not love you as if you were salt rose or topaz or the arrow of carnations the fire shoots off. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul. I love you as the plant that never blooms, but carries in itself the light of hidden flowers. Thanks to your love, a certain solid fragrance, risen from the earth, lives darkly in my body. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you straightforwardly, without complexities or pride. So, I love you because I know no other way than this, where I does not exist, nor you. So close that your hand on my chest is my hand. So close that your eyes close as I fall asleep.
Thank you. Great. Let me perhaps send this link to Carlos, because I'd like to listen from Carlos now. So let me ask whether everyone found this link okay, whether everyone managed to share this in the timeline. Henrik, have you found this link? Okay. Or Gaby?
I found it difficult to share in my.
No, I just send this to your messenger, Carlos. If you kindly copy this,
okay,
and paste this to your timeline.
Okay, all right.
I'm sure Gaby and others. Henrik, have you found it? Have you found the link?
Yes, I already shared.
You already shared. So Luis can perhaps share from your Enric's timeline.
Yeah.
I already shared as well.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So Carlos, let me, I'm not sure whether you found this.
And now I think we are going to, that's now we are going to.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So let us have some more. So, I mean, I know that some of the writers who were almost like sort of old-time favorite to me, Juan Rulfo, Carpentier, Octavio Paz, even Yosa, who received Nobel Prize a few years ago now, Fuentes, Carlos Fuentes, so Pablo Neruda most essentially. So they will come to this discussion, I'm sure, repeatedly. And I personally look forward to explore how Latin American writers are perhaps having, I mean, taking those writers in their own ways, in their own interpretations. So Carlos, if you kindly,
I put it.
Hello.
I put in my
Yeah, that's fine. So now over to you. If you kindly tell us a bit on Chilean poetry, and if you kindly share, if you kindly read your own poetry. It was a huge honor to be able to publish your poem, to be able to publish your poetry in the Granthis page. Oh, before I come back to you, something that I missed, I need to recover this now. So we have the editor of the Granthi, Shamim Shahan. Let us have his beginning take or beginning speech, and then I'll come back to you, Carlos.
Well,
many thanks, Kaisar. After a phenomenal session we have done with world poetry, which is 100 poets around the world for love, and overwhelming responses we have received from all over the world. I'm sure these sessions as part of bringing the beauty of world literature and philosophy from one corner to another will be loved by our audience as equally as other sessions. In this session, as my friend and brother, poet T. Ahmed Kaisar explained, we invited some important Latin American writers, poets, and academics to join today so that audience have an idea of today's style and trend of writing. I'm absolutely grateful to all of you. We have a plan to do session on this literature of different contents and different languages. Please help us in a way you have been doing. Please share this live streaming in your timeline so that your friends can watch this too. Please enjoy the session and continue with your comments and questions if you have any. Over to you, Kaisar. Thank you.
Many thanks, Shamshan. It was supposed to be before we start, actually. So many thanks for your input here. Let us come back to Carlos now. So Carlos, if you, like I mentioned to you before, if you kindly read your own poetry, and if you'd like to say a few words on Chilean or Latin American poetry in general, that's fine by myself.
Yeah, when I was brother, I'm talking about my brothers, sisters, and brothers, poets. I welcome you. For us and people in Latin America, it's so wonderful that we can share this kind of fundamental principle about humanity. I remember when I was a child, when I live very close to Neruda. And it was in the same school, and was taken by my teacher to meet him. And it was amazing to talk to this person, who she was, in a way, for us a student, and a kind of mythical figure, and especially for people like me, who I love poetry. And the year passed by, and we, Neruda, me, and many other people become the enemies of a political and economic system. So my poetry is based on this universal idea of poetry, where we all can share ideas and principles. What I want to read now is a poem which is going to the basis of Latin America, when the Spaniards arrived to Latin America, and it's when basically it was a transformation of the universe, and it's called. I suppose there are more English than Spanish, so I went to read in English. He planted his cross. He planted his cross where the moon rises. Breathe, daughter of the good wind, blows through mythical ravines of crystalline waters. From their chakras, cheering up love, with brother sun, they dance to life. For the caracolas, the sea is infinite. From beyond the seas, the foreigner, with this kind of iron and white heart, with his feet of ice, he planted his cross where the moon rises. The admirals and his 3 caravels, like birds of ill omen, sow seed of evil. Their Toledan swords open eternal wounds. Red are the chains, blessed by the Roman God. Poor star of the south, your nocturnal innocence rape a Castilian's options. And but what happened as I became an enemy of the regime in Chile, the military regime? I was a prisoner of war, and I was in concentration camps. So I ended to be 2 years prisoners and exile. So after that, I became, this is the dream to come back to your home. So these poems about my nostalgia for my home. I wish I can read in Spanish and English, because it's always is something where you can share. I will read in Spanish one, the first, this poem, which is Nostalgias, and also in English. Nostalgias. El tiempo va danzando, cantando, cruzando abismos, sembrando nostalgias, aprisionando recuerdos, sembrando tristezas en los caminos. Aquí me tienes prisionero de eternas melancolías. Nostalgia, tú que traes ilusiones de tierras lejanas. Nostalgia por mi tierra querida, por el pan oloroso eucaliptus amasado por las blancas manos de la madre de tu hijo ausente. Quiero volver a la bahía maternal, anclar mi barco fantasma en las pacíficas aguas azules. El viejo puerto espera. Nostalgias. Time is dancing, singing, crossing abysses, weaving nostalgias, imprisoning memories, sowing sadness on its past. Here you hold me prisoner of eternal melancholies, nostalgias, you who bring illusions of distant lands, nostalgia for my beloved land, from bread fragrant of eucalyptus, kneaded by the one hands of the mother of your absent son. I want to return to the maternal bay to anchor my phantom boat in the blue Pacific waters. The ancient port is waiting. And because Neruda, following Neruda, a concept of universality, I can see some good that you're showing the book. Yes, this is the same book. Yeah, and I will write something which is the other part of the continent. It's just India. It's something about Bombay. I was doing my work in documenting in India, in Bombay, about the people, about how they live and how they work, and I think you know what happened in India. So it was an afternoon. I found a little girl along the way and wrote a poem about her, about the society which surrounded her, and thus it was people were with me. Just not to take too much time, I will read it in English. Rosa of Bahia. No, I saw making a mistake. I'm sorry. Let me give me a second. Yeah. It's called La Niña de Bombay. That's the title. Holding her mother's hands, the girl of Bombay walked with one shoe on the stone. On the shop windows, there are white shoes. All of them always white. The lady has dollars, but yellow shoes, yellow chases, Dior and Dior perfumes. On the evening, she dresses in blue. Blue shoes, high heels, blue scarf in transparent skin. In the street of Bombay, children walk without shoes. Why do the shoes of the poor always cost more expensive? And so in this context of our life, we are involved in symbolism, and it's a very symbolic when we're talking about seven laws of unto fish. And it's very short. In the highest of creation, seven laws unto fish multiply daily hunger. But poet as Neruda, always we're in love. We believe in love. It's how can live without love? Yeah, a poet cannot live without love. It's love is what make us being who we are, people who love humanity. So I will read one called Una mesa y dos cafés, a table and two coffees. And I will read just in Spanish and English. Sobre la mesa planetaria, dos cafés, las penumbras de una tarde perdida en el cosmos de mis recuerdos. En aquel callejón solitario, en algún recuerdo de mi vida, está la misma pieza habitada por días eternos. Las sillas desaparecen, una a una, bajo las luces transparentes del crepúsculo. Inmóvil la rosa, polvorienta de tiempo, recuerdo aquella tu boca. 2 cafés para una nostalgia. En la mañana sigo mi camino por el mismo callejón solitario y en mis sueños sigo evocando la mesa, tú y el café. A tables and 2 coffees. On the planetary table, 2 coffees. The shadows of an evening, lost in the cosmos of my memories. In that solitary street, in a corner of my life, in the same room inhabited for everlasting days, the shears disappear one by one in the transparent light of dusk. The still rose, dusty with time, I remember your lips. 2 coffees for nostalgia. In the morning, I continue on my way along the same solitary street, and in my dreams, I remember the table, you and the coffee.
Many thanks, Carlos.
Oh.
Many thanks for reading this. So just a bit of introduction on Carlos, actually, before I move on to the next speaker. I'll perhaps come back to you if you have time. Carlos Ruiz Manzo is a social documentary photographer and a phenomenal poet. He was one of the leaders of the regional Santiago Littoral and one of, like I mentioned, is quite socialist Central Committee, a campesino of the Central Committee of the Socialist Party of Chile. From 1971 until the military coup of 11 September 1973, he worked as at the 16mm Department of Chile Films, a member of the Socialist Party in clandestinity. In June 1974, Ruiz Manzo was detained and imprisoned in torture centers and concentration camps in the underground garage of La Manido Presidential Palace. And then Oranges in Times of Moon was published 2006. That is a poetry book. Later that year, Ruiz Manzo participated in the Sidaza International Festival of Poetry. He was Amnesty International's inaugural poet in residence from 2011 to 2012 during its 50th anniversary year. During the residency, he participated in poetry and stayed an evening of poetry at Amnesty International's Human Rights Action Centers organized by Poet in the City and Modern Poetry in Translation. So many thanks again, Carlos. I would like to invite now poet Sajjad Sharif. If you kindly just, just to let all of our Latin American friends, Latin American poets and writers know how profoundly, how deeply Bengali literature, Bengali writers, and Bengali poets were influenced by the very idea of magic realism from Latin America. So over to you, poet Sajjad Sharif. But in the meantime, I also would like to tell that, just a second, perhaps, we do have our Roberto, actually, Roberto just joined. Roberto Ichaboren, a phenomenal Peruvian poet, already joined here. Welcome, Roberto, for joining as part of today's session. And a warm welcome. I'll come back to you soon, but let us start with Sajjad Sharif. Sajjad Sharif has been writing poetry since early 1980s. He attempted to radicalize the language of expression of contemporary Bangla poem. He, with some of the fellow poets, was deeply involved with the avant-garde literary journal Gandhi that reshaped the recent scenario of Bengali poetry. Churi Chikitsha, Knife Therapy, Churi Chikitsha is Sajjad's first collection of poems. His poems have been published in different national and international journals and included in some prestigious anthologies, such as The Language for a New Century, Contemporary Poets from the Middle East, Asia, and Beyond, published by Norton. So over to you, Sajjad Sharif now.
Thank you, Kaiser. Actually, I am not a researcher, you know, I'm a poet. I can, you know, just convey my feelings. What happened, you know, Latin America from the very beginning was very, you know, inside of our heart, the poet of, you know, Bengali poets. For perhaps Victor Ocampo, for, you know, the struggle they went through against imperialism. They fought the way they fought against the imperialism and the you know, I would say that Western corporations, because we went through in Asia almost the same, you know, similar kind of, you know, struggle in our subcontinent. So you see, as Carlos was telling, you know, Lorca went there, and one of the finest friendship between Pablo Neruda and Lorca, you know, evolved at that time. And let me just add one particular thing, that from second language, I don't know, I know a very little bit of Spanish. I did just 2 courses. I do have a translated book of Lorca. I published here in Bangladesh in Bengali translation, you know, collected from all of his books, kind of representation of Lorca's poem. But what I saw that almost every important poet, almost so many important poets, Bengali poets from both the Bengals, from West Bengal and Bangladesh, they felt a kind of close affinity to the Latin American poets, and they translated. Like, you know, one of our very influential poet, leftist poet, Subhash Mukhopadhyay, he translated Pablo Neruda very early in perhaps late 50s or early 60s. Like, you know, one of the contemporary, very important contemporary poet from West Bengal, Shankha Ghosh, he translated, you know, Nicholas Guillen, you know, in Bengali. Like, you know, I personally translated Cesar Vallejo, Pablo Neruda, then, you know, Octavio Paz and Borges. You know, why particularly, I sometimes ask question to myself, why Bengali poets are very much inclined to the Latin American poets? Perhaps for the reason that, I don't know, from my perspective as a poet, while, you know, Carlos was reading his poem, I was trying to understand, you see, while he was reading from the original Spanish poetry, the sonorousness of the poem, the musicality of the language, which, you know, immediately struck my, you know, heart. You know, perhaps I'm not able to understand the meaning, but the sonority, but you know, the musicality of the language. This is also the very core of Bengali poetry, you know. Even when you see like poet like, you know, Nicanor Parra, while he was writing anti-poetry, he wanted to just, you know, move away from the very poetryness of poetry. But while you're reading his poem, he can't, you know, he couldn't beat the sonorousness of Spanish languages. So from the very beginning, so it happened. And you see that surprisingly, some very much influential poets like Neruda, like, you know, Octavio Paz, they came to this part of the land, and in their memories, in their books, like in, you know, I myself feel that one of the finest book written on India is In Light of India, written by Octavio Paz. Like, in the memoirs of Pablo Neruda, we get to know that how he spent his days just near India and inside India and all this, area. So a kind of affinity. And perhaps third point is in Imaginary Homeland, a book written by Salman Rushdie. He interestingly wrote one very interesting thing that, after the Second World was over, Rabindranath Tagore suddenly, he was faded from the European mind, Western mind. But Tagore, perhaps you call him Tagore in Latin America, perhaps, I don't know. His culture is very much alive. He is remembered as a living, like he was translated by, famous, the wife of a famous poet, Zenobia, the wife of Juan Ramon Jimenez. And so perhaps, and the famous rivalry between, Pablo Neruda and Huidobro, it went on after the publishing of the first book of Pablo Neruda, because he wrote a poem under the shadow of a particular song written by Tagore. And it was a scandal in that particular time. And later on, he would, what I want to say that in Latin America, Bengali poetry with, I would say that Tagore is very much alive. And for the political history, political struggle, we feel affinity because, and for particularly poetry itself, the sonorous character of the poetry, and after, and the way they voiced political expressions, political understanding of their land, of their people, of their struggle in a very poetic way, which is, as a poet, I want to learn from other poets, So these are the facts that we feel actually affinity to the Latin American poets. I'm not a researcher, but just it's my personal understanding of what I know about Latin American poetry.
Thank you. Many thanks, Sajjad Bhai. If you'd like to add any more, you can, but is that okay? If I just go to another speaker? Or would like to
yeah. Later on, perhaps I would add something.
Fantastic. Yes. Fantastic. It is a grand pleasure. I'll come back to Enrique and Luis very soon again. And it's a great pleasure that Robert Ichuburen has joined, an extremely celebrated poet and academic from Latin America, an Uruguayan poet. Let me tell a bit more on Roberto. Roberto Ichuburen is a poet, novelist, essayist, and translator. Some of his books of poems are Central Asia, Ministry of Education and Culture of Uruguay Award publication in Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil. El Expreso Central, the express between sleep and weaknesses, Nancy Basilio Foundation Award. So many awards actually received so far, and congratulations to his phenomenal journey in literature. So his essays include The Space of Truth, the Felisberto Hernandez. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce right. So Ministry of, and then many essays that's available in also in Wikipedia. So if you would like to explore more on Roberto, you'll find so many links, so many research work, very talented and world-leading research works, and he has so many novels and poetry published actually. So the books are, his novels are The Devil in the Hair and I Was an Ember, 3 short novels in 1 volume, His latest books of narrative is Russian Knives, is a chronicle about the political and cultural life of Russia in the 20th century. His play, Natalia Petrovna, was awarded and published by the Cultural Center of Spain, Uruguay. His play, Africa, based on a real case, was performed in Montevideo throughout 2012 and 2013 and published in Buenos Aires. He is the director of La Flauta Magica publishing company, specializing in critical bilingual editions of poetry and the rescue of major political works written in Spanish. So, Roberto, a warm welcome. If you kindly share your own take on Latin American literature, and if you kindly read some of your poems, you can perhaps read your poems first, and then we'll come back to you for your take on internet for Latin American literature afterwards, if that's okay with you.
Oh, hello, do you hear me?
I do, yes.
Okay, so how are you, Hamed? And hello to everyone.
We are fine here in the UK.
In this meeting, yeah. And I think that Tapodhir, yes, translated Lorca, and he was talking about Lorca, and I will read to you a poem by Lorca in Spanish so that you can see how it sounds, all right? Yeah. It's called Romance de la Pena Negra. Las piquetas de los gallos cavan buscando la aurora, cuando por el monte oscuro baja Soledad Montoya. Cobre amarillo su carne, huele a caballo y a sombra. Yunques ahumados sus pechos gimen canciones redondas, Soledad. ¿Por quién preguntas sin compañía y a estas horas? Pregunte por quién, pregunte a ti qué se te importa. Vengo a buscar lo que busco, mi alegría y mi persona. Soledad de mis pesares, caballo que se desboca, al fin encuentra la mar y se lo tragan las olas. No me recuerdes el mar, que la pena negra brota en las tierras de aceituna bajo el rumor de las hojas. Soledad, qué pena tienes, qué pena tan lastimosa. Lloras zumo de limón agrio de espera y de boca. Qué pena tan grande, corro mi casa como una loca, mis dos trenzas por el suelo de la cocina a la alcoba. Qué pena. Me estoy poniendo de azabache, carne y ropa. Ay, mis camisas de hilo, ay, mis muslos de amapola. Soledad, lava tu cuerpo con agua de las alondras y deja tu corazón en paz. Soledad Montoya. Por abajo canta el río volante de cielo y hojas. Con flores de calabaza la nueva luz se corona. Oh, pena de los gitanos, pena limpia y siempre sola. Oh, pena de cauce oculto y madrugada remota. If you don't understand Spanish, it's for you just
yeah. Would like to read. Yeah.
And on the other hand, I translated some poets, some Russian poets, and some American poets like John Ashbery and Wallace Stevens. Another time, maybe I can read to you my translations. But anyway, now I have a question to you. Do you want me to read in English or in Spanish?
Best if you kindly read perhaps a bit of both. So one Spanish and perhaps one in English
Okay.
to cover
All right.
non-Spanish audiences.
Yes, I'm going to read from this book that came out bilingual in English and Spanish. It's called The Virgin Mountain in English and El Monte Nativo in Spanish. I'm going to read just a few fragments. It's a long poem in English. The new open field exposed the earthly curve, a perfect place for affection, impersonal, floating on the whole. The ink spot has expanded, and a pure fluid in a free state falls over an alien body. Life is a dynamic topology that keeps us on tenterhooks. It modifies the current of the past, but not the true way in which desire works for us. A fold in the immense stretch linked to an inflection point, a point of view, a crossing of lines, a neural precipitate of points, a shake-up, and what is learned from it, something we call simulacrum or image from which a soul arises, a singular immanence that inhabits the problem and solves it just by posing it. Curiosity slipped smugly into that scheme. It explores the variants at play and decided which one was unique and indispensable in order to get the most that came out of it under a field of stars when a fold untimely has become more pressing, the soul of the point of view, an inflection at the point of intersection, a present gift made to ourselves alone. It won't navigate beyond our skull. The world is entire in it, a filigree of larval themes, doublets that will die with it, a shipwreck at the boundary of the reef, a background buzz in the empty box, an idiolect of our mind, jumps and roar of the sea, the infinite speed that carries the cosmos. Life causes these turbulences, these paradoxical transformations, this stuttering, this turning around, and the seizure of being multipliers of existence, an impersonal power of achievement that writhes and bites its tail. Our heart is buried in the season, a guide for perpetual motion captured in its center of begetting. In the cinema of the universe, this vacant curiosity doesn't necessarily ask for a complete incarnation. It opens a vaster register, a transcendental yet immanent stratum that precedes both the virtual and the actual, an irrational chaos at the bottom of everything. Much enters from the invisible. Sparkling phosphorus generates a parallel effect emanating from an original attraction, an illusory effect of similarity. A peerless recognition removes us from habit and plugs us into movement. It wants to see more of what is brought forward, an apparition not yet assimilated, built upon a disparity of coexisting points of view. The tip of a wheat-colored dress seen one instant from the corner of her eye, at the angle of the door seemed a crumb falling from the breakfast table to my aunt. My mother had arrived unbeknownst to the summer house, had crossed the corridor, peering into the rooms without her being seen. That fresh morning, the shutters still hid the green outside, the tip of a wheat-colored dress through the corridor. She was invisible to all. A strong expectation of happiness is happiness itself. And this summed up the feeling of the house for me. Everything about to be, yet already there. I wasn't there yet, but the door was there. Someone having breakfast in bed, the odds already at play, the material emergence of a place, a house by the beach, the flesh of the ether of the eon. The body breaks down, words instead appear to be eternal. In their infinitive, crucified at their stake, as if they were forever relevant and pertinent in all situations. They want to say something, to show a way of tying the knot. They fall like crumbs dropped by Tom Thumb for birds to eat. Barnacle, cachoeira music, a scent of petals folded among pages, release life inside the nostrils. Moaning, snorting, menacing, shouting, ululations, cries of horror, clicking of bones. The body has no need for words in order to make itself understood. The glands do their business. The toes freeze, the heart, vital flyer, through 1,000 rootless gives notice. My throat begs for water and wakes me up. I forget my ankles that carry me everywhere, discreet feet without callus, well-turned calves, knees, don't bother me. A blue chevron stretches as a convenient skirt, monkey arms hanging, tiger spine arching, while I sprinkle water drops over a snake's hot tongue. Do you want
Thank
me
you. Many thanks, Roberto. I'll come back to you. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you for your input on Latin American literature overall. But let me have Luis Gonzalez Barrios. Luis Gonzalez Barrios, welcome again to this session. So Dr. Luis Gonzalez Barrios, who is an assistant professor of Spanish Spilman College, a specialist in contemporary Spanish literature and culture. Most of his research to date has focused on analyzing the relationship between avant-garde art and politics from a transatlantic perspective, particularly during the 2 decades that preceded the Spanish Civil War and its ramification to the present, which is very interesting, Luis. Dr. Gonzalez Barrios' research interests also include political theory, broader studies, and film and media studies, which have inspired a wide array of courses on contemporary topics such as immigration, mass media, propaganda, and social activism through art. So thank you very, very much, Luis, for joining. And if you kindly continue, if you kindly begin your own input on Latin American literature.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. And again, thank you to the Gronthi for organizing this talk. And okay, I place the Latin American boom as a series of waves or tectonic changes that had a decisive impact on the culture of my home country, Spain, but also on my intellectual and political trajectory. So today, I want to talk about Latin American literature as a literature professor in the US. Instead, I will tell you how the Latin American literature made me a literature professor. So I will tell my own story because beyond the anecdotic, my story reflects a broader process of knowledge and cultural awakening that happened to an important part of my generation back in Spain and that changed the cultural and political milieu. So my story, and I'll try to be brief, but I just written a page. I was a late reader. When I was 17 years old, approximately, I was interested in various things, but above all, I wanted to be a football player. But by that time, when I was 17 years old, I already realized that that wasn't going to happen. I was going to be a professional, and I wasn't that naive. So it was the mid-90s in Spain, and our country was fantasizing about having achieved this European modern status, whatever that means, after a long century of internal conflict and military dictatorships. So it was 1992, just to put you in time, when the Maastricht Treaty from the European Union marked the consolidation of the neoliberal project in Spain and Southern Europe. And this same year, there were the Olympics in Barcelona and some global exhibitions in Seville and Madrid that celebrating this like final arrival to this old semi-peripheral nation to the so-called global future. So in this amnesic country dazzled by siren songs of modernization, I was a teenager without great ambitions, and lacking a clear direction. And then I discovered Latin American literature at that time. First, there were some short stories by Cortázar, and I have in some shelf in my house, and some love poems by Benedetti and Neruda. My awakening to books was just starting. I went back to Garcia Lorca, I revisited Machado and Rubén Darío, and from there I returned to some of the classics that I read in high school. But literature was no longer, for me, that thing associated with my secondary evening classes, with these black books, cathedral books, editions prologued by some serious gentlemen, like these editions were what we read in high school. And the literature at that time started to be more like a passion, okay, more like an obsession. My interest in school text became genuine. And I reread some of the texts in high school. But then something extraordinary happened to me. I found Jorge Luis Borges, and he was the downfall, the door of no return to this bookish universe, okay? And one book led to another and then to another, and I devoured any like boom, pre-boom, post-boom literature. Literature spoke to me in Spanish, and geographical and temporal borders were gradually dissolving to me. And also, by the way, the best football players at the time were coming from that part of the world too. So it became kind of like an addiction. Okay? With Borges, I discovered Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, Hume, Whitman, Conrad, Chesterton, Berkeley, the Greek classics, but also the Hebrew and Arabic traditions that my country had ignored for so long. Also with Borges, I became interested in Buddhism, on Edgar Allan Poe, and on Dostoevsky, and all those Russians Russian writers, they still fascinate me to this day. With Octavio Paz, I learned about Marcel Duchamp and Dada, but also about the labyrinths of Mexico and the Malinche, about the rich cultural and philosophical traditions of India. And through him, I discovered Tagore and the translations of Zenobia Zampruvilla that you mentioned. Carpentier made me look at the Spanish Baroque with new eyes and to rethink that this thing called surrealism was perhaps not just a French invention. Ernesto Sabato, put me in a tunnel, which led me to Sartre and Albert Camus, but also to Baudelaire, to particle physics, to Nicanor Parra, and to Violeta, the great Violeta Parra. And of course, the boom. Cortázar, Julio Cortázar, make me walk through the streets of Paris, through the jazz of New Orleans, through the utopia of Solentiname and the Nicaraguan Sandinistas. He introduced me to Ernesto Cardenal too. Carlos Fuentes led me to Don Quixote, to Proust, to revisit Hernán Cortés and the Comuneros of Castilla, to the Mexican Revolution. Vargas Llosa told me about a city full of dogs similar to the military Spain from which it was so difficult for us to escape. And Garcia Marquez and Rulfo told me about lost places where the dead did not completely die and people lived for more than 100 years. And Cesar Vallejo was this dead man for me. I have briefly mentioned the San Vinistas. It was not a minor encounter. With these readings, my first political consciousness awakened too. There were some guerrilleros with long beards, brave women fighting and protesting, Victor Jara's song, Mercedes Sosa, Silvio, the disappear, the violence of the state, Cuba, Chile, Nicaragua, El Salvador, the mothers of May. I discovered all these stories in a moment when I began to hear about Chiapas and the Zapatistas in the early 90s, and that another world was possible. In an anesthetized country like Spain in the 90s, this reading spoke to me about social revolutions and change, so far away from our national triumphalism, normalized and disciplined democracy, and consumerist idiocy. But also, all these authors and readings told me about our own Spanish Civil War, about Lázaro Cárdenas and the Mexican exile, about George Orwell and the Iberian anarchism, about the Republican diaspora throughout the Americas. I also realized that the best collection of poems of this Spanish tragedy was written by a Peruvian, Cesar Vallejo, who spoke to me through time and distance as a brother of struggle and poetry. All these readings also told me about the Black legend, but also about the brutality of the Spanish conquest of America, the genocide of indigenous nations, and of landowners and haciendas that were so similar to those that appear in the Hola magazine or Hello magazine that I read at the dentist clinic. And Nicolas Guillen, of course, he told me about African slaves brutally kidnapped for the benefit of a so-called global economy, a system that I realized had opened the veins of Latin America for 500 years, and etc., etc. And finally, I discovered, obviously, Roberto Bolaño, writing from a crowded and touristic beach near Barcelona. And he would take me back to the streets of Santiago and Mexico City, and back to poetry. In short, it is through the boom and its multiple shock waves that I rediscovered my own tradition, my own history, which led me to intellectually navigate the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and beyond. And they opened the door to immerse myself critically in other European traditions and in other literatures written in other languages, mostly Basque and Catalan in my own nation state. And of course, I also rediscovered or discovered for the first time Al-Andalus and Sepharad. Because let me be clear here, for me, Latin American boom, Latin American literature and its precursors was not only good literature, but a critical, political, and philosophical repertoire of the first order, which dissected and reconstructed modernity from a new and eccentric angle. In some, what I encountered through them was cutting-edge contemporary thinking. Becoming a professor of literature and having to migrate to the Americas due to the Maastricht Treaty achievements, quote unquote, was only a matter of time. My landing in the US was full of excitement and strangeness, with the findings and misunderstanding of many migrants. But my cultural backpack was full of texts that I wanted to continue growing here in the United States. This backpack gave me a cultural compass pointing south until this day. Now I teach literature in a historically Black college in the south of the United States, in Atlanta. My students are mostly women of African descent. I keep learning and adjusting my teaching every day, every class, every new reading. And I'm learning to see America through their eyes and experiences. I would say that I could constantly readjust my focus, but not my passion. And that's my story and that of a significant part of my generation back in Spain. The baby boomers still struggling to make a living, but full of stories that came through the Atlantic. And by the way, I still love soccer. I'm still a Barcelona fan and a little bit of Atletico fan. And thank you for your time. That's my...
Many thanks, Luis. Many thanks. The name you mentioned are, I'm sure the audiences are also equally can connect with them because they shaped even world literature so meaningfully. Thank you for your beautiful input. Let us come back to...
Can I say something small?
Please do, Gaby.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone in the name of La Ninfa Eco. Thanks to Carlos, Enrique, Roberto, Luis, Ana, who is there, Luis Benitez, everyone really. All some of you, I know most of you, but not all of you, but thank you, Ahmed and Shamim as well. I wanted to also show you that I have books of everyone here. Like I have one from Romina.
Oh, wow.
I have one from Enrique.
While Carlos was reading his poem, you were showing a book. Was that written by... Oh, yeah. So you have everyone's book, actually.
I have everyone's book here. This is Roberto, Carlos. Yeah. That was everything I wanted to say.
Ahmed, I will send you a book, a copy.
Please do, Carlos. I deserve at least one.
I promise you, I will send you a copy.
Exactly. And you know, I'm such a great admirer of your, not just poetry, but also your political philosophy.
Oh.
Where is my book?
Yeah.
Gabby, where is my book?
Yes, Sajjad Sharif was...
Yeah, I just met you today, so, but You should, but for the next one, for
At least-
the upcoming one.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Let me be very clear.
Ahmed, how is
If-
possible I
if
don't
you-
have your book?
Gabi,
You are my
amazing.
friend.
You're amazing,
So
Gabi.
Gary,
kidding, I'm kidding.
One thing that I need to clarify that it is an honor to have such a great poets and writers as part of this session. And most of your poetry book, most of your novel or fiction, I know that made a huge impact in the in readers' mind. But if you'd like to be translated, Sajjad Sharif is not just a pundit, not just just simply an admirer of world literature, or the one who can critically analyze world literature in my understanding, but also a great translator. So I'm sure if you can receive at least a copy of those books,
Well,
will be translated.
let me just my best translator is Valeria Baker. It's a wonderful work here done. Yeah, it's extraordinary, and we need some people like that because I mean,
exactly to make a bridge,
yes,
to make a bridge between two different cultures.
It's very important. Yeah, without
exactly.
Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Thank you very much.
Actually, we get to know the older poets, you know, the poet of previous generations. But we need to be connected. The contemporary poets should be connected, you know. So yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that our understanding is not just limited in just Pablo Neruda or Lorca or whatever we are talking today. It has to come to the contemporary phase as well. So many thanks to Robert Tichever, a phenomenal poet who joined from Uruguay. We'll come back to you again. Tapodhir Bhattacharjee is also with us. We'll come back to you shortly. Let us have, Luis Benitez, a extremely celebrated Argentine poet. I sent Eric his poem called Ezra Pound Speaks. I became the admirer of his poetry actually while I was reading in some online portals. And then I sent this to Eric for reading. And then I realized that he can join as well as part of it. And this is an honor to have Luis Benitez as part of today's session. I'm sure he was copying a while ago. Luis, can you hear me? A warm welcome. Luis joined from Argentina, an extremely celebrated poet in Argentina, an award-winning poet from Argentina, Luis Benitez. Can you hear me, Luis? So let us have perhaps, before I move on to Henri, and Anna joined as well. Anna Lopez joined from America. How beautiful is this? So Eric, if you kindly read the poem that that was written by Luis Benitez, and then I'll see whether we can talk to him. His camera is on, but I'm not sure whether he's listening to.
Luis? Luis.
Eric? Yeah.
Right. Before I read, I want to say thank you to, in particular, Carlos and Roberto for embodying one of the most important things for me when I'm performing, but also I'm translating, because I translate from the Occitan, sometimes from Spanish. I've got a translation of a book that I did, one that I'm proud of, and sometimes Rilke in German. Whenever I translate, I read the original over and over and over again to try and connect with the musicality and bring something of that into the poem. And Some translators don't do that, and your readings were very beautiful in your poem, Carlos. I also would like to read, instead of some of the ones you gave me, Kaisha, the last poem of Victor Jara, because there is a connection between Lorca and Jara, both being murdered by fascist dictatorships, and also it would put in context some of the horrors that Carlos must have gone through and the bravery that he had to survive, and the luck. But if you want, I'll read Luis's poem now.
Yeah, if you kind of read Luis now. And then
Okay. And this has a slight connection to the troubadours because Ezra Pound the troubadours. Not very well, very naturally, not very true, but here's Luis's poem. Let Ezra Pound speak. If you have nothing to say, keep silent. Let Ezra Pound speak. From the shadows, the splendid old man, from the fine waterline, the magnificent old man shows you the genuine banknotes of his fortune, and all shine, legitimate, definitive, which indeed never stops. If you have nothing to say, keep silent. The high gentlemen, the variegated ladies who lived and died and were born for this only cause cannot allow by their side the stuttering of a dwarf, the limping of a false purse, denouncing that the gold of their verbs lacks that thin waterline, that savage finesse, the impeccable spot not adorning the head of a written animal, which goes through the paper only for an instant, but comes out of the bottomless animal, of the live viscous where royal blood runs, that one where red comes from, and beats outside like a monster of light, like an image without other chapel than everything, of every universe possible or impossible, which could indeed be adored, standing and without veils, without altars or anything, not even acolytes, under the name Our Lady of Veils, crowned by manure and nerves of eclipses and novas. Oh, you tall and short, sublime, malicious poetry, reigning over the extended night and the narrow day.
Thank you. Many thanks, Eric. Is Luis Benitez there? Can you hear me, Luis? Luis, can you hear me? Perhaps
Luis.
Luis's video is
Unmute.
on, Gaby. I'm not sure whether Luis
I
is
will send
available.
him a message.
Okay, that would be great. But in the meantime, let me come back to Anna. Enrique is waiting as well, but Anna needs to go somewhere. Ana Lopez, many thanks, Anna, again. A warm welcome. Let me find out some. So, Ana Lopez Hage was born in Bogota, Colombia. She studied literature in the Provincial and Universidad Bogota, and then completed a master's degree in European, Latin American, and comparative literatures and cultures at the University of Cambridge. Anna is currently a doctoral student at the Lozano Long Institute for Latin American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. In academic terms, Anna works in areas ranging from literary and cultural criticism to sociology, gender studies, feminisms, and decolonial perspectives, which are very interesting areas. And her academic work is undisciplined and is closely related to her poetic, creative, spiritual, and vital works. Anna's first collection of poems, Here Where I Tremble, is getting published in 2021 by Synchronia Casa Editorial. So thank you, Anna, for joining again. Over to you. If you kindly read your poems with a bit of your take on Latin American literature as a whole.
Yes, thank you very much, Ahmed. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. Well, I'm very grateful for all of your takes on canonical literature from the boom in Latin America. And it speaks to me a lot because, as Ahmed already said, I studied literature both in my undergrad and my master's degree. And I had a very special relationship with the boom because I focused my interests in studying underrepresented voices during those times, particularly women, because something that's common around the narratives of boom literature in Latin America is like these big names like Cortázar, Borges, Rulfo, etc., which are amazing reference like for what we understand as Latin American literature. But the voices of women have been invisibilized from that period. So I would like to share a little bit on one of those authors that are not normally talked about a lot, particularly in Colombia, since in Colombia, Garcia Marquez is this big name that takes over like what the boom Colombian literature looks like, or like takes over what Colombian literature in that period was during the 60s. But then this author, Alba Lucia Angel, is a writer that slowly through time, like there's been different efforts towards visibilizing her work. She wrote like the novel that has been more widely read lately is called Estaba la pájara pinta sentada en el verde limón, which is part of a children's song in Latin America. And it was published in 1975, but it was a novel highly censored because of the political issues it touched on. So for me, it's important to highlight this specific author because Cien Años de Soledad, perhaps 100 years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez, is this big canonical Colombian text that addresses Colombian violence in a very aesthetic and beautiful form that touches on magical realism, which is like this very well-known genre. But then Estaba la pájara pinta offers a perspective that touches on it's a historical novel. So it goes from El Bogotazo, which was a very important political moment in Colombian history, where the war between liberal and conservative parties started like very strongly. So this novel narrates the life of a girl growing up between this period of time and El Frente Nacional, which was a moment in the 70s in Colombia, when both liberal and conservative parties decided to share power. But that led to a way more intense current of violence because they left the communist perspective and the leftist most radical perspectives aside. So the guerrillas were born. And I bring this into the conversation mostly because I am very grateful with all of the authors that have been mentioned here before, as they were also part of my literary growth, I engaged with Cortázar strongly when I was a teenager. It really talked to me a lot. Borges was also very important. Pedro Páramo, Rulfo's novel, is one of my favorite novels of all time. But I keep seeing this tendency towards invisibilizing women's voices during the 60s and 70s in Latin America. So that's why I wanted to bring, in particular, Alba Lucía Angel's work to the conversation. What else can I mean, if we're talking about the contemporary debate, as Ahmed already said, I'm not currently engaged in literary studies specifically because I'm doing Latin American studies, which is a more interdisciplinary discipline. It's not really a discipline, but it's a more interdisciplinary perspective. And yesterday, I came back to a text that we read in literary studies, that is La Ciudad Letrada by Ángel Rama, which is like the, would you translate that to English? Like the world, sorry?
The literary city.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you. So I realized that when I was in my undergrad, I didn't really get what La Ciudad Letrada meant. And going back to the text and thinking about literature as a colonial import in Latin America has changed completely my perspective of how I understand literature, how I understand narrative, and how I want to approach my own poetry as praxis. Particularly because, I mean, La Ciudad Letrada, or the lettered city, involves a dynamic of power, where literature becomes a language only a few can relate to. So we are all, of course, colonial subjects in a colonized world. But my question would be like, if it's possible to decolonize literature, and if it were possible, how could we do it? Which voices would we need to engage in a dialogue with, apart from the well-known canon, for example, of the boom? So that being said, I'm going to share some of my poems. I'm going to share also a poem by a Mapuche poet from the south of Chile, Roxana Miranda Rupailaf. I'm going to share it because I think we need to visualize more the great work of non-canonical voices. And I am very fond of this book, so I'm going to start with sharing her voice. This text is called Xumpal. It's a long poem with different fragments, and I'm going to read one of my favorite. It's in Spanish, so apologies for the non-Spanish speaker audience. I will later share one of my poems in English, so like we get to get a bit of everything. But for now, I'm going to share this one in Spanish because I'm really fond of this. So this is from Xumpal. 2. Miro mi cuerpo en los espejos y son algas. Mi cuerpo alga, verde blanco que me encuentra. Mi ojo de agua que me encuentra. Canto, me salen cantos y una espuma. Flores, yo tengo flores en abismo. Un jardín que es un delirio. Un atavío de pieles, peces que me lamen. Mi cuerpo alga en los espejos se repite, se multiplica. Un mapa de mí, hay un mapa de mí sobre el agua. Me confundo, me toco y no soy yo esta agua, esta sal que se deshace. So this is Roxana Miranda Rupailaf. I'm going to share with you a poem I wrote in English. So like we were before, Luis was telling us about him, a little bit of his experience with literature and with being a literature professor. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of mine. I studied literature, like Ahmed said. My master's degree I did it in Cambridge in England. And it was a very intense experience for me because it entailed recognizing myself as Latin American and recognizing myself as non-white, but rather white mestiza, and asking myself the questions about identity, about gender, about race, that I think have been fundamental for how I approach not only the texts I read, but my citation politics and my own embodied experience. So I'm going to read a couple of poems that were rooted in that uncomfortable feeling of being in England, a place that, because of its colonial heritage, you know, maybe for people that are not from there, might be tense to have this experience in these spaces. So the first poem I'm going to read, it's the one I have in English. The title is Strong, and it has an epigraph by Sylvia Plath, that goes. For the eyeing of my scars, there's a charge. For the hearing of my heart, it really goes. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood. Tearing up the forces of a brutal tidal wave, I re-encounter voices, remembrance, and the trial once again. Silence washes up on the shore of restlessness. I am so good at this, Lady Moses, you would say. Stand up, clean your face. You're not going anywhere. Daddy says he loves you, Daddy says. Mama claims it's love, Mama claims. And they called someone because they can't bear with it. They called someone blind enough to sweep the pieces you left on the way. So this poem I wanted to share with you in English. I wrote it while I was in England. And then there's another text that I wrote while being in England that it's in Spanish, but I also want to share it with you. Gabi has heard it already. Some years ago when we met, I read this poem for the first time. And here it goes. It's called, I'm going to read in Spanish, so apologies for non-Spanish speaking audiences. But the poem goes, it's called Tercer Mundo, Primera Persona. And it has an epigraph by Octavio Paz that goes, sí, esto es muy hermoso, pero no logro comprenderlo del todo. Aquí hasta los pájaros hablan en inglés. Esto es muy hermoso, pero no es mío, porque lo que dicen el ciruelo y los eucaliptos no lo dicen para mí. A mí no me lo dicen. Que nadie me venga a explicar cómo de grietas se ha librado el mundo. Que nadie venga a decirme que a este abismo que habito también puedo llamarle casa. Si el cuervo y la ardilla me son ininteligibles, no es por su presumida ausencia en mis libros escolares, es que cuervo y ardilla, que aquí son fauna cotidiana, ocupan un imaginario ajeno que dejó de maravillarme con el primer irremediable, frío y doloroso cambio de estaciones, un cambio que mi cuerpo aún no ha sido capaz de asimilar. Que no venga nadie a enseñarme que tradición no se escribe con T de tiranía, que el aire que respiro ya me dijo, sin apuro, que va con calma, porque al otro lado del mundo se vale llegar cansado, a medias, como desgajando las sobras de un imperio enlutado. A mí no me vengan con eso, que yo soy sudaca, ruidosa y grosera, que tengo el cuerpo bien sexualizado, que mi piel exuda movimiento, que abrazo más de lo que debería, que en mi cara hay una estampa de incultura que me blinda la cabeza y me da un pase gratis a la sonrisa educada, el saludo condescendiente, la invitación ausente. No, a mí de grietas selladas no me hablen, porque cada tropiezo, cada atropello, cada silencio y cada caída se revuelve en mi vientre con el ruido de una corteza que aún se abre y se quiebra, tumba y retumba, suena y resuena en la oscuridad de mi alcoba. Dice, "It was so nice to meet you", cuando se despide. Finge maravilla cuando el sur se le menciona, se rodea de norte mientras se embriaga en el ruido de una noche que siempre carecerá, siempre añorará y nunca comprenderá lo que es verdaderamente el ritmo. So that was Tercer Mundo, Primera Persona. And I'm going to close my participation with this poem that I wrote when I was thinking about what poetry was, how I approach poetry. It's called Poética, and it has an epigraph by Hugo Mujica, a very fond author of mine. And the epigraph goes, un relámpago en la noche que dilata anuncia su mismo apagarse. Buscando el poema perfecto, me topé con que yo no escribo poesía. No ando yo buscando develar el símbolo, desnudar la palabra o darle vuelta a este artificio que llaman lenguaje. Yo me siento en mi sed de tiempo y tiento al alba buscando que me seque las heridas, me rasco la sien y bostezo agotada, revuelco mi rabia y uno que otro complejo, mi culpa de clase, mi conciencia racial irresoluta, o este peso que cargo a cuestas y que señalan como género, mientras la luz emerge en un día que ya se agota. ¿A mí qué el poema perfecto? Eso, parece, le toca a los hombres. A mí me toca entender que de lujo no quiero mi palabra, que me cuesta lo ininteligible, que a veces me narro en metáforas y recovecos de poco acceso y falsa luz y encandilo a quienes quisieran me leyeran. Las espanto. Yo no tengo tiempo o interés de contemplar solo las formas. A mí me quema el hilo que me recorre la piel y es ahí donde escribo, en mis bordes, mis límites, lo que apenas queda y toma forma en un chasquido de ira. Yo ya me cansé de buscar al poema. Yo ya no amenazo al verbo buscando nombrarme con falo. A mí me agotó traducirme y rogar por una luz que se pierde en el vacío, que me habita el pecho y se sabe universo. Observo mis manos. Están cansadas de tanto escribir con culpa y afán de sonar algo que no son. Las beso despacio y les digo que suelten al poema perfecto, que en mis escombros se agota la palabra y no vale la pena buscar lo eterno en algo impermanente. Observo mis manos y toco la calma que brota al sentarme en Dios, sentirme en Dios, cerrar los ojos y dejarle el mundo a los hombres que buscan nombrarse, saberse, erigirse en la erección de la palabra hueca que tanto tiempo han osado llamar poesía. Gracias. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be part of it.
Many thanks, Anna. Many thanks. Like Sajjad Sharif was mentioning, the sonorous flow of the poetry was so soothing in ear. So even though the Spanish language, when it comes to Spanish language, I actually do not understand this, but I can realize, I can see the flow of musicality. Wonderful. Many thanks for sharing this beautiful poetry and your own input on literature, on Latin American literature. Most of them are also my all-time favorite. Let me read some audience's comment. Saida Shahnaz Ahmed have a wonderful program. I will watch that recording later on. Camila Cien Fugos. Vamos, Ana Lopez. Narayan Koirala, wonderful. Brinda Mullik, wonderful effort by the Granthi, enlightening indeed. Krishna Priya Bhattacharjee, my mother came without being seen. Just wonderful. Watching wonderful session, Krishna Priya Bhattacharjee, poet from India. Saida Shahnaz Ahmed enjoyed the passion of the poem in Spanish. Romina Fesci Grosso Roberto. Jolie Mahmoud, thank you for sharing with us. So many thanks. Let us come back to Enrique now. So Enrique is, as you know, quite familiar face now in Granthi's art initiative, art and literature initiative. So Enrique Barnales Alvarez is a Peruvian author, Peruvian poet, actually a cultural manager living in Colorado, USA. He holds a doctorate in Latin American literature from Boston University. He currently works as an associate professor of Spanish literature at the University of Northern Colorado. He has recognized the mythical poetry group. He has established the mythical poetry group Immanencia. He has published the books of poetry, Immanencia, many other poetry books actually, and the anthology of Peruvian poetry of 90s. He has participated in different literary events in the United States, Mexico, Argentina, France,
just in the middle,
and Spain. Many other countries. Actually, he publishes in the New York-based magazine Vice Versa interviews, short stories, poems, reviews, and urban chronicles on a weekly basis. So many thanks, Enrique, for your support. Over to you for your reading and input.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. What do you want me to do right now? To read a literary
If you
piece?
kindly read perhaps from your own fiction or
Yes.
poetry, and you can perhaps add your input on rhetoric and literature afterwards. So if you'd like to do it now, you can.
Yes, I will list this a short chapter of a novel that I published in Peru back in the 2008. Is Los Territorios Ocupados. This chapter, small chapter, is titled "Passengers in a Trance." It's obviously is borrowed from Charlie Garcia's song, no? Pasajeros en trance, no? Okay, I'm gonna read this. The Anxiety Disorders Research Center. Are you worried? Are you experiencing anxiety? The ADRC of Magdalena City, associated with the Health Alliance, is looking for volunteers for a clinical study where the new treatments to control anxiety will be tested. If you are interested, you will receive a specialized diagnosis, totally free prior qualification, and a financial reward of 300 new soles. For more information, call 460 ADRC or email adrcstudy@hotmail.com. Remember, anxiety disorders are real, dangerous, but treatable if detected in time. Together we can defeat anxiety, the ADRC of Magdalena City. He opened for the first time his gracious eyes in a state hospital. Then he inhabited Goran City, the northern sector of the capital. It wasn't going to be the train's fault if he was late. The machine had transformed the space-time coordinates of the ancient city. Previously, one would take 45 minutes and rush hour to get there from Sarumia. Now only 5 minutes were time between the control station and the Desamparados. The boy had a beautiful and mechanical gesture with a curved mouth and a floating gaze. He stripped off his sunglasses and hid them in the south pocket of his jacket. Mrs. Anna is going to kill me. I am not doing my job in the Oxen Bear. My co-workers don't like me. They think I am privileged because the owner, the American, gives me the white glove treatment. Don't not think about that, phone. I should have used less hair gel. That complains a lot if I don't. Put your stockings on your head when you go to sleep. The grandmother will say to him, and the old man will repeat it to me as if it were a mantra, so that your hair will be disciplined. Of course, that was it. I have to send my father to rebuild the Death Star one of these days. If it's necessary to learn to cook, if I want to do it, because I am going to have swallowing cardboard. Why am I lying myself? Why am I lying to myself? I can cook. I cook better than my father. I might as well end up eating cardboard. Overall, cardboard is not such a bad food. Even doctors say that it has a lot of proteins and vitamins. Better than 10 glasses of milk or 2 hard-boiled eggs. The tree, we're all vegan. The tree, the cardboard unite us to heaven and the fall. I could prepare an excellent stew with cardboard, with onions, chile, coriander, for real. Do you think you are eating a real chicken chili, a real goat chili, a real seafood rice, a really tiger's milk? Everything will be cardboard in the menu at the end of the day. Cardboard fruit salad is what so popular actors eat so gladly. The new Andean menu made from indigenous cardboard with a great success. Atop, Mrs. Anna would stop mistrusting me, and I would have earned the respect of my co-workers and customers. I will become the employee of the month. What a hell of a noise. He covered his ears, trying to suspend momentarily in his head the rhythm of progress.
He began to calmly observe the different individuals who momentarily inhabited the train wagons on the way to work. Back home, I can almost see it with my own eyes. These wagons bursting with screams and cries. They perceive the unmistakable smell of death. At least something united, a language, a religion, a past, a common history of sufferings, struggles, and joys, in short, their own death. Life and hope in cell, on the other hand, will be born from a wagon like this many years ago. The Red Army of workers and peasants, led by Leon Trotsky, will penetrate to the heart of Mother Russia in the now mythical armored train, ending typhus and the White Plague, with a moral technique that in 10 days made the whole world tremble. Back in this, my life, I realized that here each one is so different to me. I refuse to believe that this affable looking lady who lovingly protects her plump creature takes me for a fool. That schoolboy lost in some island of his thought could spin on me if he has the opportunity. That girl, oh my God, how hot she is. I would love to kiss her in her lips so that she can recognize the purity of my feelings, my infinite love for her, and the moment of savoring my saliva. What a shame she turning around. Fortunately, it's already fixing my memory. There she won't turn around. Let's listen to She's a Star by James. She was the conventional girl from Magdalena City, the Ruth girl by the Pacific Ocean cliffs, the coordinated and musical movement of her hands, the post-industrial hairstyle, and the recycled attire had confirmed. Now we have been invited by many like them. Fun thought. Is it possible that they manufacture them in series and send them to us to test the benefits of their new products? To find out if we still have the capacity to love, even this new class of machines? The trembles slightly disappear into their pink lobes. Her lightly made-up eyes, the barely dropped mouth, and his delicate voice have made the phone sail through feathered abysses, slightly shaken by the Pacific waves, the visions of Easter, where all that he loved will be destroyed and abolished forever. His face was of a feminine perfection. He was completely fascinated with that Caucasian Oriental hybrid machine, the silky black hair that fell slightly below her shoulders, exactly where the chip was installed under the disguise of a butterfly tattoo. She remaining unmovable, eternal, like a crystal palace that generates fear, a terrible paralysis in spite of her undoubtedly fragility. The young woman was talking to her best friend, the unfriendly punk boy, a faithful believer in the year of the rooster, as we can realize from his bizarre hairstyle. You could see in the look of the eyes of the latter all the irrepressible desire to kiss the girl of the pink loves, the soft breath floating like a blue velvet handkerchief in her throat. Her skin was too soft, like the touch of ghee between the fingers. In short, she was a slightly organic, gluten-free creature, an unconquerable territory where any pan fighter would lose his soul and his heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. Many, many thanks again. I will come back to you soon again. Luis Benitez is here. How beautiful is this? Luis, you have so many great, so many admirers.
Yeah.
Especially of your poetry. Eric was reading your poem called Ezra Pound Speaks. And I read some of your poems. It's great. It's such a pleasure reading you. If you kindly read your perhaps new poems, if that's okay.
Okay, I should do the translation.
Yeah.
Hola, Luis.
So Luis Benitez was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1956, the city where he resides. He has received the follow awards, International Poetry Prize, Poetess, Poetess Amelia, and many others actually. The Foundation Award, Buenos Aires, Prize of the International Fiction. And then Paris, he received an award from the International Prize for published work, Macedonia Palomino, Mexico, 2007. His 36 books have been published in Argentina, Chile, Spain, USA, France, England, Italy, Mexico, Romania, Sweden, Venezuela, and Uruguay. Last published collection of poems, The Afternoon of the Elephant and Other Poems, translated by B. Alopati. So thank you, Luis, for joining. If you kindly read one or two poems. Maybe if you kindly perhaps translate or give a bit briefing in English.
Hola Luis, Ahmed está diciendo que tenés muchos fans y que Eric leyó tu poema de Ezra Pound Speaks y bueno, leyó tu biografía y que te estaba preguntando si podés leer un poema. Tenés el mute.
If you kindly unmute yourself.
No se te escucha.
Yeah.
¿Me oyen ahora?
Sí.
Okay, we can hear you now. Great.
¿Me oyen ustedes? Muy
Sí,
bien. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I apologize because I had problems with the connection. I will read my poem, Alta Costura.
Okay.
No hay profesión peor que la de los diseñadores de moda. Esos que dictaminan convencidos si para esta prolongada temporada el largo de los versos debe llegar hasta la rodilla o bajar hasta los tobillos. Sus agrias manequins desfilan luego por todas las pasarelas disponibles, semejantes a enormes frutillas, un gran salmón encarnado trastabillando sobre altísimos zapatos, o parecidas a ridículas cacerolas vueltas abajo, listas para el prometido aplauso de la repetida, tediosa novedad. Si el cómo debe estar medio desnudo, si corresponde que se vea el qué. Sus creadores aseguran que de haber sido invitados, Homero y T.C. Eliot dirían, está bien, y casi ninguno vacilará en aceptarlo. En todo momento el dictado de la moda es la peor cosa de este mundo. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I read?
Yeah, sorry.
¿Puedo leer otro poema?
Sí. Adelante.
Maldición eterna. Nos dotaron de predisposición a las caries. Nos inculcaron toda su tristeza. Cada frustración nuestra fue un destello de ajenos asuntos ocurridos en 1950. Fuimos el resultado de una noche de cerveza, de una reconciliación tras pelear por los impuestos, una infidelidad sorpresivamente descubierta. Nos dieron la réplica de sus horribles infancias, la adolescencia avasallada por los reyes, la madurez resentida de tan pesada herencia, la vejez fotocopiada de sus dos rostros cansados, mirándonos fijamente desde las lápidas. Ninguno pensó al entrar a la cama en que un crimen apretaban entre sus brazos. Ah, y el cuento del amor, el amor de los padres por sus hijos, de los hijos por sus padres, la coartada. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Many thanks, Luis. Beautiful. Like I said, the flow of the sound, the slow musical sound that intrigues me, and I'm sure the audiences are equally intrigued by this. So Gaby, if you'd like to give a bit briefing, otherwise I would like to go back to Tapodhir Bhattacharjee. And this is a great, would like to give a bit briefing on this.
But then you will be back to Luis later on. Luis, I will say that. Luis, ahora vuelve. Ahora vuelve con el resto. Ahora va otro invitado y vuelve. Quería agregar eso.
Muy bien. Muy bien.
Great. Great, Gaby. Congratulations to the phenomenal journey you have, Luis, in poetry. And that shows the reflection of post Octavio Paz, or the post-Bloom poetry, mainly Pablo Neruda, post-Nerudian poetry. I read many of your poems, and I was hugely fascinated by this. So audiences who are interested in this, Luis has many translations available, and that is available online. If you'd like to read it, it's open for you. A warm welcome, Rosana Camarena, a Mexican poet and a wonderful friend of mine. Rosana, a wonderful supporter of the Granthis initiative. Thank you very much for joining as part of today's session. You look really beautiful. You always look beautiful, but today your face is glazing enormous beauty, like Gaby and others, Gaby and Rome. Gaby has just celebrated her birthday about 2 days ago. So happy birthday, Gaby, from the Granthi, from the whole family of Granthi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then Rome Presti also joined. This is first time I met Rome, but you look equally beautiful, Rome. Well, I will come back to you, but in the meantime, I would like to go back to Tapodhir Bhattacharjee, who joined from India. So Tapodhir Bhattacharjee is quite a known face for, when it comes to Granthis virtual art and literature activities. Professor Tapodhir Bhattacharjee, a poet, essayist, literary theorist, and a critic, was born in 1949. He is the former Vice-Chancellor of Assam Central University and the forerunner of contemporary Bengali literature. His constant research on the recent literary theory and application of the West is well known amongst the readers. He has 141 books to his credit so far in both Bengali and English. Essayist Tapodhir made his debut as a poet in the 70s, and his first poetry book is called Tumi Shei Pirito Kusum. The total number of his poetry collection to date is 35. He is retired as an emeritus professor of the Department of Bengali, Assam Central University. He also played a vital role as a professor of modern Indian languages, as a professor of modern Indian language and literature at the University of Delhi. And some of his noteworthy publications are Potiche Sahityo. And he's the one who introduced Bhakti in Bengali literature in a huge way. And congratulations to you. Phenomenal journey in literature and literary theory, Tapodhir. Welcome again. Over to you for your own take on Latin American literature.
Thank you, Kaisa, once again for providing me this unique opportunity. In fact, it has been really a very, very rare opportunity for me for for participating, for listening to some wonderful poetic expositions from various corners of Latin America and Spain. I did not have such an opportunity, even I don't think in my, as far as my memory goes, this, I will remember this day for many more days. Because as Sajjad was rightly saying, but I am afraid that I don't know Spanish. Sajjad at least knows something of that. But whatever I have read in Latin American literature, and for that matter, anything outside the Anglicized world, it is always through English. So I know, being a teacher or rather a student of literature, many aspects are lost when you cannot read in the original language, which has been employed by different literatures. But even then, as we are global citizens, we believe in world literature. So world literature today definitely cannot be completed if you do not have any even possible access to Latin American literature. As I have been very engrossed in the recital of wonderful poems, and particularly four of them I will remember for many more days to come. Anna is not here perhaps because I saw that she was regretting some internet problem there. But anyway, please convey my regards to Anna as well. The Roberto is here, and also I forget his name, sorry, but their recitals were wonderful. But you know, you can't speak about everything in Latin American literature today. But when Anna was saying, I was thinking within that when we talk about Latin American literature, we talk about the booms which is known by the entire world. We talk about all the great literators, basically novelists, the poets. Because I hail from the northeastern part of India and from a very small town, actually even some of the names did not reach me till my youth, mid-youth, you may say. And that's why Lorca, Neruda, and Octavio Paz, their poems, I have some acquaintance, but after that, I'm sorry. And definitely these things I did not have any access, but listening to all of you, now I regret that I should have been more up in doing, in making myself contemporaneous with the Latin American poetry, which are being written today, or maybe in last 3 decades or so. Now, my experience basically is with the fictional microcosm of the Latin American writers, starting from the great father figure, Jose Maria Arguedas. I'm sorry, I will have to use only the English subtitles because Deep Rivers and its young protagonist Ernesto even now haunts me. And Arguedas, he wrote some other books as well. By Deep Rivers, I have read many a times and tried to interpret in my own way. But as I remember, Rana was speaking of the post-colonial situation in a colonized world. And she was posing some questions too. I'm not going into the details because these will all be theoretical stuff. But I remember what Arguedas told us, he wrote in Spanish in his later life, but he wanted to write in the Andean language of Quechua, but he could not do that because of obvious reasons. Because of that colonial situation prevailing everywhere. And we in the Indian subcontinent, and that too, myself, Kaisar, and also Sajjad Sharif from Dhaka, we speak in the same language, Bangla, Bengali, you may say, and we have also the same experience. Now, Arguedas was seeking not only compassion for the oppressed, and that's why your worldview comes into the question, but a sense that the conception, while having conception, you must also have a very clear perception, a worldview of your own, in which people, even mountains, animals, the rain, the truth, all have dimensions of their own. And this dimension is powerful, is revealing, and utterly unlike the maybe the European original counterparts, the Iberian ones, as you find in Spain. But even then, Arguedas had an experience which is shared with us through a poem, because we are listening to all the great contemporary Latin American poets today. And I remember what Marquez, Gabriel Garcia Marquez made us aware of as solitude. And solitude has multidimensional meaning, rather many nuances of meaning. And that solitude, also before him, his senior, Arguedas, had also felt in his own way. And I remember because there is a poet from Chile and Santiago, and something happened with a doctor, a certain doctor called Lola Hoffman. And he sang a song in Quechua. And he told that if we want to prosper in our own way, economically, politically, socially, otherwise, then we must develop the worldview of the Andes people. But because of that, he was beaten black and blue. And after that incident, that sad incident took place, Arguedas, who is basically a fiction writer, he wrote a poem. And the title of that poem is A Call Upon Her to Some Doctors. And I will be reciting, because I am among the poets today, some portion of that wonderful poem, and which I think that will throw a very illuminating light on what we should do. Because the great Sartrean question, why write? You know it well, that why write is a very basic question, a fundamental question, which all the poets and literateurs everywhere in this world have to respond to. So I quote from that poem. This is a long poem. I will quote only some few lines. They say that we don't know anything, that we are backwardness, that they will exchange our heads for others, better ones. They say that our heart also does not match the time, that it is full of fear, tears, like the calendar lark, like the heart of a huge butchered bull. And thus saying, we are impertinent. They say that some doctors tell this about us. Doctors who multiply in our land, who grow fat here, get golden. What are my brains made of? Of what the flesh of my heart? Did I work for centuries of months and years in order that someone I do not know and does not know me cut off my head with a small blade? No, brother mine, don't sharpen that blade. Come close, let me know you. Look at my face. The winds blowing from us to you we all breathe them. The earth on which you count your books, your machines, your flowers, it comes down from mine, improved, no longer angry, a tamed earth. We know that they want to misshape our face with clay, exhibit us deformed before our sons. Arguedas wrote it many years ago, several decades in fact. But even now, everywhere in various parts of the world, we are searching for an adequate response to that question which has been posed by Arguedas. As Carlos, when he began to write, to read out his poems, then we could come to know from his words, as well as from Ahmed Kaisar's, that he believes in socialism. That is, he believes in an ideological position. Whatever ideological position you might have, it is important to take some very strong affirmative position, because our position determines the truth that we want to establish in the world we inhabit. Unfortunately, in our part of the world and also elsewhere, even now, the struggle has become more sharpened. Nevertheless, in the face of oppression, abandonment and pillage, what will be our reply? What will be the reply of the poems that I have been listening to you, like many of you who are today part of this program as viewers? Our reply is life, life which is boundless and which cannot be denied. We are face to face with various kinds of reality that, yes, overwhelm us perhaps. One which over man's perceptions of time, sometimes it seems a utopia. But even now there are tellers of tales and there are wielders of pen who write wonderful poems like Luis Benitez, like Anna, like Carlos, like Roberto, and many others whom I have not been lucky enough to listen to read. Unfortunately, the sonority about which Sajjad was speaking, when 2 or 3, Roberto and Carlos had read out their poems, and the same sonority, same musicality I found everywhere. When yes, I cannot comprehend Spanish, unfortunately, one of the best languages of our world, but then that musicality has reminded me of, because I sometimes try to see the literary world through the prism of literary theory. In the, in the 60s and 70s, Rolla Barthes, the great post-structuralist visionary, he wrote a book which was published posthumously in English, because I cannot read French also, and so I have to rely on English only. So the rustle of language, and that rustle of language I was reminded of while listening for till now from so many great contemporary poets that Spanish language has created. And they are trying to unleash before us, to open before us a new and limitless utopia for life. Yes, they are affirming life as far as I have understood. Some of their poems have been translated into English, but even then where it has not been translated, it is only in the original Spanish. But yet, I have today taken a great lesson, which I have read in so many times, and like any of you, that our world is one, and that world is human world. Through the lineal generations of many hundreds years of solitude, which we might have, but at last and forever perhaps, we have some aesthetic and social positions to take And that is what I have gathered today as my inheritance, as the intricate structure of poetry and in general, and also the human creativity, which has given me some logic to live a life which is worth living. And so long, Kaisar. So
Yeah.
this is what I had to share with you. Thank you
Thank
once again.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Tapodhir. We have, is Roberto is still there? Okay. Let us come back to Rosanna Camarena. Rosanna, as you know, quite a regular face for Granthi, and someone, Magdalene Contreras wrote The Girl in Red. I'm his fan. I'm Rosanna's fan as well. So let me read. We have Gaby. I'll come back to Gaby anyway. So Rosanna Camarena is a poet, is a Mexican poet and a cultural expert who was born in 1968 in Mexico. She graduated in graphic design. Since 1996, regularly participating in the multidisciplinary workshops, events, anthologies, both nationally and internationally. Rosanna is the coordinator of esteemed Mexico International Literary Festival called the Other International Literary Festival. She's a member of Por Favor Lee Poesia, Please Read Poetry. Wow. Also, which was created to disseminate poetry to the public. She also participated in the project called 1,000 Women Against Violence. Her books have been translated into English, Italian, Nohati. Rosanna is also included in the literary directory dictionary of writers in Jalisco. So thank you, Rosanna, for joining, and a warm welcome. And
hi, my dear Ahmed. I'm so proud to be here with all of you. I'm so proud to be a Latin American poet, and more a Mexican woman poet. The country for Sor Juana, Rosario Castellanos, Octavio Paz, Rulfo. And I sang to you, I apologize because I don't have the translation of my poems. I don't know, it's a problem. I think almost all of you speak Spanish, no? Is good for you, Ahmed?
Yeah.
Speak Spanish? Yes?
Yeah, you can, yeah, thank you.
Más o menos.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I don't know, I have to translate, and this poem is don't have to translate now. Okay, the first poem talk about the touch, the body touch. Is comparing the playing music. Tócame, 1, 2, 3. Sigue tocando, surca, delinea, hazme crecer, monta, multiplícame como pan, dilúyeme, conviérteme en vino, desilvana, teje, toca, vuelve a tocar hasta que te abra la puerta, los brazos, las piernas, viértete, lávame, hagamos comunión de estos cuerpos ácimos, entra y tócame, en infinito compás, 1, 2, 3, como único instrumento. Okay, And now I have a poem talk about inside, little spaces inside, outside, and compare the little things with the big things in the universe and life. Say, instantes. Y en el preciso instante que nace la duda, nace también una certeza, de esas que hereda el tiempo con desinterés. Entonces, por instancia me pongo a unir los poros de la piel como los diagramas numerados que se hilvanan con tinta para que aparezca algo. Y aparece mi figura de cuerpo entero. Me tiendo, me hago carpa, te doy sombra, y entonces, en el instante que entras, me trasluces. Y allá en el parque, en el preciso instante que un niño juega a las canicas, yo subo al bimbalete donde los latidos alcanzan su algidez. Y en el lugar que dejas caer la caricia, la tomo como pañuelo para guardarla en el bolsillo, por si acaso. Y en ese preciso instante que falta sal en la mesa, provoco a la mañana para desayunar palabras dulces con leche y horneo recuerdos que satisfacen el cuerpo de bondades. Y me detengo precisamente un instante para comprobar que también es preciso dejar morir las flores en el jarrón sin remordimiento. A veces se necesita dejar crecer el preciso instante para que alcance estatura. Y es preciso y abrupto y necesario también el tiempo donde se comprende que es la misma tierra con la que se juegan los pasteles de lodo que está bajo las uñas y sobre los muertos. Y llega el día que por un instante, no sé cómo, se confunde la Vía Láctea con los quarks, las palabras con el barullo, el celular con un rostro, y cambias los ojos por pantallas multicolor. Y en ese preciso instante que nace otra duda, nace también la certeza que siembra el sabor, que deja un beso recién robado, que asegura que si el tiempo se pierde, también hay manera de encontrarlo. And now I have only 5 minutes left. Now I want to read for you a poem talk about is not easy to be a woman. A Latin American woman is so hard. And this poem is Ay, mujer. Mujer, modelo para armar a la fuerza y desarmar de un golpe. Mujer, convertible, mujer ajustable, camaleónica, santa y puta, madre y amante. Mujer de corazón sustituible, de sentimientos intercambiables. Mujer que funciona con calor. Un solo roce le da energía para seguir deambulando. Mujer, ay mujer. Pero ay mujer, te exhibes en el aparador, sonrisa colocada, arrugas naturales, muy pocas canas, muchas ganas y los dientes parejitos. De fácil uso, sin necesidad de atención. No exijas solvencia económica, que al cabo tú puedes sola. No debes reparar en un físico agradable, simplemente hay que ceder. Un agarrón será suficiente paga. Ay, mujer, pero ¿hay mujer? Existen varios modelos: cristal, porcelana, plástico y trapo. La garantía está en las manos que lo tocan. No se preocupe usted por su eficiencia, pues apenas no le satisfaga, podrá sustituirla sin ser juzgado. Si se rompe, no importa. Si le arrancan los ojos, no importa. Si se coarta su libertad, limita su pensamiento, trunca su oficio, no es grave. Para eso fue hecha. Por eso nació de una costilla. ¿Qué más da? Ay, mujer. Si no hay mujer, no es para que te quejes. Agradece que tienes marido. Ser hembra es oficio heredado. calladita, cargadita, obediente, sumisa, para ser buen ejemplo para tus hijas y que los varoncitos vean cómo debe ser una verdadera mujer, hogareña, fiel e inmaculada. Dios y hombre te enseñaron a decir, y amén por ello. Y ahora, ¿hasta dónde hemos llegado? Mujer pensante no sirve para tener hijos, mujer sin hijos no sirve para nada, mujer con visión es peligrosa, mujer con éxito es una amenaza, mujer que sabe amar es una pérdida. Entonces dime, mujer, ¿hay mujer? Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Many thanks,
Thank you
Susanna, for reading this beautiful poem. Let us come back to Romina Freschi now. We have two more poets, and then I'll come back to all of our speakers again. Two more poets, so one Romina Freschi, and then Gaby Sambusity, our friend, and the one who has collaborated with the Brontes initiative, and the director of, and the founder and the director of La Ninfa Eco, Gaby Sambusity. So Romina Freschi lives in Buenos Aires. She began to publish poetry in 1990s. She founded and directed the Poetry and Criticism magazine Plebella 2004-2012. She's a teacher of writing and literature in university and creative contexts. As a researcher, she has focused on the study of, among other topics, the works of Nestor Forlonger, Juana Inés de la Cruz, Delmira Agustini, and the critical imaginary in relation to configurations of gender, methods, and sexuality. She's a part of the groups Poetas por el Aborto Legal, Argentine. As an editor, she has realized various experiences, such as the press's Arti Plegable, La Flauta Magica, and Juana Ramirez Editora. In 2013, the press UDEBA, University of Buenos Aires Press, published an anthology of essays, illustrations, and poems from Plebella, selected by Fest. In 2020, along with Estosian Alangona, she began a new stage for Plebella called The Afterlife for Clouds. Over to you, Romina. Many thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. I was listening all morning because it's morning here, but on and off because I'm helping my little daughter with her math. So excuse my camera coming on and off. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Gaby. I was trying to listen to all of you, and I'm not sure what I want to say, but I was thinking maybe just invite you all to read again a wonderful essay by Jorge Luis Borges, which is The Argentine Writer and Tradition. I think
one
we
of our
can.
all-time favorite. Borges is one of our all-time favorite, Romina.
Yes.
So one thing, before you continue, one thing I need to, well, let me ask you. Did you find the live streaming okay? Could you share this in your timeline so that your friends can join, perhaps?
Yes, I put it in Plebecha, Nube, the group, and I think it's broadcasting there. I don't know. Pardon my English.
Okay.
Well, I was saying that I think we can put it the Latin American writer and tradition, or merely the writer and tradition. I think we all suffer tradition, and I think that's the word. We all suffer it, like we suffer the Inquisition, and I think that tradition and canon are terrible things to us. For women especially, huh? I find myself reading over and over again to Juana Inés de la Cruz. If Roberto Erchavarren is over there still, he's someone I read Juana with him a lot. And what I wanted to read today to you is part of a book that has one of her poems, El Sueño, as like a background. A few years ago, I had a bird in my house, and I call it Sor Juana. So the experience of having a bird at home and the experience of dreaming El Sueño of Juana Inés de la Cruz gave birth to this book that has an English translation. It is Echo of the Park. It was published by an American USA press, Eulalia Books. And it was the book that Gabi was showing that was in Juana Ramirez Editore in Spanish. So may I read? It touches the earth and touched my body with its flutter. A scent, that desire, that body, small and dead, of the one who was my friend. Both free, but human, both things at the same time. When we touched, death also touched us, like an omen. Something no one gives any credit to. It's an ache that fades, trapped in the machine of what needs to be done to function, and it never digests. That absence has feathers. It doesn't process this. After a miraculous encounter in the gravel of the ordinary, joy at seeing you, at having known you. Then there's a hole with no insides that translates all I can get into wind, into dust, and nonsense. Sor Juana, thrush, with none of the ambition of great trees. You were fashioning paradise among the flower pots, and I was cultivating my hips out of air, giant, fat, like rainbow farts to cushion our faults. I had faith, and I walked that way, unknown, with your feather heart sleeping just above my own, as if paradise existed right under my chin, your heart with mine. That Eden didn't last. I knew it, but even so, I climbed the air that now clips me. A miniature Eden, also lost, bruises the stupid peace that comes over me like paralysis. Beside ourselves, the root of rituals appeases us. High on routine, I attain survival, like it's nothing. Everything follows its course until it backtracks. The end is the beginning. Death gives way to life. The spirit of commonplaces communes us, lined up with no escape. Vulnerable whether we follow or don't follow commands. I want to thank Janine Peters for the translation. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you very much, Romina, for this beautiful reading, beautiful poetry.
Thank you.
Let us come back to Gaby, and then I'll come back to Luis Benitez, whose poetry I'm keenly looking forward to listen to. So Gaby Sambusiti is a friend, is one of the close friends of the Granthi and mine. So Gaby Sambuceti is an Argentine-born, UK-based writer and poet. She holds a BA Creative Writing from Brunei University, and she's a Latin American and Spanish literature teacher. She's the founder and managing director of a magazine and podcast called La Ninfa Echo, with a team of writers and academics from Europe and the UK, the US and Latin America. She was the event director at the Oxford Writers' House, a hub for writers within the community and University of Oxford. In 2019, she participated in talk about writing and freedom of speech at the House of Commons. She's the editor of The Good. She's the author of The Good, the Bad, and the Poet. Also, she toured in different countries, and her books, reviews, and collaborations appear in different magazines, anthologies, and literary projects from Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Germany, Bolivia, US, Mexico, Chile, Italy, Spain, Bangladesh, India, and the UK. Gaby, happy birthday to you again from the country and from all of our friends.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please read two of those poems. One that I am
your poem. Thank you. I would like to say thank you again to all. It's a real pleasure to be here today, for real. Like the poets that were present today, they are wonderful, amazing, and I'm a fan of all of them. And I would like to, so I was not going to be here today, but Ahmed convinced me. So I was thinking what to read today. So I have your poem, Ahmed, that I'm going to read. And I have another one that I never, you know, this poem, I only read it once. And it was the first time I read in London in a public place. And this poem is meaningful for me because it's the poem that it was the beginning of La Ninfa Echo. So the project that then I was a founder, and it was, I think this is the previous poem before I created that project. And I wrote it in Argentina, and it says, Narcissus drowns slowly and resurrects among disappointed journalists. He raises his blue feet in the tomorrow. Narcissus gathers the pieces and it forms a new moon. Myths are reflections, nothing is allowed. Behind the fetish despair, a pastel not adjusted. Those blind kids cannot put it together. And that is the end, official or recycle, of Narcissus in 10 TV sets assassinated in a dark night of unidentified nymphas. Thank you. So that's a poem. And I have another one that is very short, and it's Ahmed poem, and it's called My Courage. So for this one, I need you all to close your eyes and imagine a room full of people rejecting your verses. Imagine a room full of people criticizing your career. Imagine a room full of people laughing because of the way you look. And now imagine all that over again, but instead of being in the same room, you are now dead. Yes, it doesn't matter anymore. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much again, Gaby. So we are approaching to the end. We are just going for the final input from all of our speakers. But by the way, Gaby, thank you again for reading, and you look beautiful today. This is perhaps because of you celebrated your 22nd birthday 2 days ago.
Yeah,
no,
you look great also, Ahmed.
Thank you.
You look wonderful.
Great. So
you're like very like you look like that this summer is starting. You look like summer.
So wonderful chat.
Exactly, Romina. We need to.
You look beautiful.
We need to bring summer.
You all look beautiful.
Let us come back to Luis Benitez, one of my favorite poets from Argentina, who kindly joined this session. If we kindly have your final reading, if that's okay. Thank you.
So Luis, as Ahmed, I told him to read about.
Yeah,
so,
the final, yeah.
Luis, si querés continuar con lo que habías preparado.
Perfecto. ¿Leo otro poema o vamos al texto sobre el boom?
Si querés hacer los dos, porque Ahmed me parece que quiere otro poema también, así que las dos cosas, creo yo.
Bueno, perfecto. Perfecto. Bueno, quiero agradecerles a ti, a Ahmed y a todos los que forman parte de la organización por haberme invitado y tener el placer de escucharlos. El texto se llama José Donoso y el boom y post-boom latinoamericano. La superagente literaria Carmen Balcells, principal impulsora del boom, afirmó: el invento de la palabra boom no fue para constituir una fraternidad de amigos, para relacionarse afablemente e irse de excursión al campo con las familias. No, no, no. Aquello era un lobby, algo que tiene que ver con el poder literario, con vender, ¿comprende? Vender. Y tantas décadas después aún funciona el invento. Venden millones de ejemplares. El boom fue una construcción cultural y a la vez comercial, facetas que se complementan, interceptan, interactúan, se interpelan y se modifican recíprocamente. Sin la una no hubiese existido la otra. En ocasiones la lógica del capitalismo genera eclosiones culturales enriquecedoras en el doble sentido de la misma expresión. Como construcción cultural innovadora, el boom debía establecer una modificación del canon internacional, abriendo paso a una vanguardia latinoamericana. Las figuras más destacadas fueron los luego archiconocidos Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Julio Cortázar, Mario Vargas Llosa y Carlos Fuentes, también el chileno José Donoso. La maniobra permitió inclusive asociar al boom propiamente dicho a antecesores y continuadores, brindándole a todo el conjunto una instalación todavía más concreta en la cultura. Llamativamente, el período de los antecesores y el de los continuadores del fenómeno, el post-boom, son los únicos que incluyen escritoras, asegurando el rol de los masculinos asignados al papel principal e indiscutiblemente canonizado del boom propiamente dicho. La obra de Donoso, que coincide con el estallido del boom y recibe su impulso, es su novela corta El lugar sin límites, publicado por la editorial Joaquín Moritz en México en 1966. El lugar sin límites tiene por protagonista a Manuela González Astica, un homosexual transvestido que regentea un burdel en la remota localidad chilena de El Olivo, propiedad casi exclusiva del poderoso diputado y terrateniente local Alejandro Cruz, Don Alejo, de quienes prácticamente todos sus pobladores dependen, directa o indirectamente. Tal como lo resalta Severo Sarduy en su obra Ensayos Generales sobre el Barroco, la inversión central, la de Manuela, desencadena una serie de inversiones. La sucesión de estas se estructura en la novela. En este sentido, El lugar sin límites continúa la tradición mítica del mundo al revés. El significado de la novela, más que el travestismo, es decir, la apariencia de inversión sexual, es la inversión en sí. Una cadena metonímica de vuelcos, de desenlaces traspuestos, domina la progresión narrativa. Inversión que desplaza en la novela de Donoso el tradicional rol protagónico del varón heterosexual, sí figura central en las obras de Cortázar, García Márquez, Vargas Llosa y Carlos Fuentes, por la de un travesti, madame de un prostíbulo, en un sitio tan sórdido como el Olivo, carente en absoluto de los mágicos encantos de Macondo, París u otros carismáticos ambientes como los pergeñados en ocasiones por Vargas Llosa o Fuentes. Y lo hace Donoso en 1966, hace más de medio siglo ya. La inversión de valores, escenarios y protagonistas operada por Donoso en su novela posee múltiples facetas, una de las cuales es su tratamiento del patriarcado, el sometimiento y el género, aspectos a los que la inversión manifiesta en El lugar sin límites hace algo más que lesionar. La novela de Donoso abre desde un sitial de prestigio y difusión el juego de transformaciones e inversiones que, décadas más tarde, deparará la mayor publicación y divulgación de los antes sujetos fuera de lugar. Textos que en factura de novelas, relatos y cuentos atenderán a referir las peripecias de protagonistas LGBT, ya visibilizados y aceptados como sujetos literarios por el canon y no relegados a las áreas marginales y o censuradas, barridos fuera del campo de lo admisible. Desde luego que estas meras especulaciones en cuanto a la calidad propia y la proyección alcanzada por El lugar sin límites de José Donoso no agotan cuanto puede decirse respecto de su obra, ni la relevancia de su aporte en fecha tan lejana como los años 60, durante el boom latinoamericano, para favorecer el ingreso de un nuevo tipo de textos en el canon actual, cuando se multiplican los títulos y lanzamientos editoriales de similar espectro. Antes bien, atienden a establecer un posible punto de partida para discusiones y debates posteriores.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Many thanks, Luis. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining again to this session. And look forward to, like Romina mentioned, look forward to meeting you perhaps face to face, not just virtually, face to face, somewhere in the UK very soon. So thank you, Luis, for your participation, and many thanks for this beautiful and insightful contribution to today's session. Let us come back to Enrique for your final input, Enrique.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I really like everything, what you read, guys. In general, to share your love for Latin American literature and different expressions, you know. And what I wrote so many things, and then when I was listening to you guys, I just came out with a combination of feelings, thoughts, and for example, I wanted to go back a little bit to first what I mean, like Laura was the Colombian writer that was here. Laura was her name, or
Ana.
Ana. Yeah, like Ana was talking about the importance of women representation in Latin American literature. And I was thinking of our first Nobel Prize of Literature, Gabriela Mistral, that won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1945. The interesting thing with Gabriela Mistral is like she's the second non-Western writer that won the Nobel Prize of Literature after Rabindranath Tagore in 1913. And the most interesting thing is that she is the only one of the important Latin American writers that met Tagore. They met in New York. And I'm gonna share a document here to the group. It's a document that you can find digitally. It's in Spanish. It's the chronicle of the Gabriela Mistral when she met Tagore in New York. No, it's a beautiful document. It's in Spanish, unfortunately for the people that don't read Spanish, but that encounter of the two non-Western Nobel Prizes in that moment, and the first Nobel Prize in Latin American literature was a woman. And Gabriela Mistral is not only a Chilean writer, but is a global writer of Latin American literature. She lives in Mexico. She considers herself sometimes like a Mexican writer too. She works for Vasconcelos during this project of literacy in the rural areas, no? And the rural areas is very important also for many of us, like Latin American people, because it's where the magic realism also, Rulfo literature, all the, Arguedas too, no? Going back also to Professor Tapodhir Bhattacharjee that was talking about Arguedas. Arguedas also is like, for many of us, the Peruvians, is although he didn't get the Nobel Prize like Mario Vargas Llosa, he's considered the most important writer of Peruvian history. No? And quoting a little bit Luis Benítez, hay una novela de Arguedas de 1940s, de 1940, El Sexto, where is a travesti character, el Rosita. I wrote an article about that. The Rosita is a travesti way before the Donoso novel, El Jardín Sin Límites. But I love Donoso and Jardín Sin Límites. And also when I was reading the piece of my novel, the restaurant where the character, El Fauno, works is El Oxeno Pájaro, the Oxen Bird, ¿no? Que es el title of the famous Donoso novel, ¿no? And about Arguedas, Arguedas is the crossroads of Latin American literature, where, for example, Ana was talking about Ángel Rama, and all the concept of the theory, not talking about the product, like the poetry or literature, but the 20th century also is the times of Latin America literary criticism. No? And one of the big names is Ángel Rama, and the transculturation concept is intimately connected with the dead rivers, with Los Ríos Profundos of José María Arguedas. Is the novel he point out Ángel Rama, the Uruguayan Ángel Rama, to talk, to expand the ideas of the transculturation about this mix of traditions and this the Latin American literature. No? I would like to, one of the last things I want to share is talking about this combination of registers that is Latin American literature and the global impact. Octavio Paz said that the 20th century is the century of the Latin American literature. These colonized territories, no, then will become global. But there are different moments where these territories becoming global. No? The first time was the modernism that was very well studied by Ángel Rama. Later, the Mexican Revolution is very important too. And also the Spanish Civil War, where many of the Latin American writers met in Spain, like César Vallejo, Octavio Paz, and others. Borges was there before, no? When he created the ultraism, no? This avant-garde poetry movement, no? And aesthetic. But the thing is, and later, obviously, in this we were talking with Luis before, Luis Gonzalez, my friend, Cuban Revolution. We don't have boom. I mean, boom, without the Cuban Revolution, that was a huge event in the 20th century, in 1959 Cuban Revolution, we could not talk about the literary Latin American boom. No? After the Cuban Revolution, there is a question about in many parts of the world, no? In England, in the continental Europe, in United States, what is going on with Latin America? And it's where, in that moment, where the Latin American program start growing up in the United States. No? Why? Because we need to know about these people, they defeat a dictator, no, a Cuban dictator, and now they are getting independence and autonomy from the United States of America, no, that consider these territories like the backyard of on their interests, of United States interests, no. So in that moment is when the boom also connect. And also many of the authors of the boom earlier, they were very well connected with the Cuban Revolution, no? The first Mario Vargas Llosa, Carlos Fuentes, Cortázar, and obviously until the last day, Garcia Marquez, no? There was the more loyal writer of the boom. What is the boom also? We have 2 Nobel Prizes, no? Mario Vargas Llosa, and also Gabriel Garcia Marquez, no? And obviously I was talking earlier about the first Latin American Nobel Prize that was Gabriela Mistral, no?
Gabriela Mistral, so, yeah.
Yes, all this talk about what is Latin American literature for us, no? It's the combination of the myth, no? That, for example, Luis Gonzalez was talking about Alejo Carpentier, no? This oral myth, the oral traditions, no, of these cultures. That in some of the cultures were displaced or disappear, no, like the Caribbean native people disappear, and then the important how this population, the African population, was important to the Americas, no? And they brought also their culture. And how I really re-encounter myself with the Latin American literature that is not only a style of writing, or a style of literature, but it's a lifestyle, no? Not only capitalism tissue lifestyles. I mean, like a culture is a lifestyle. In what sense? It's a way of living, no? For me, Latin American literature is not only reading something, but it's living something. It's the folk tales of my ancestors, no? But those folk tales, I encountered also in United States, in the South, no? We need to remember that William Faulkner, all the Southern literature, was very important for the Latin American boom, no? For Vargas Llosa, for Garcia Marquez, but also is because these territories that are colonial territories, no? United States also has this colonial experience. I rediscovered it when I was living in Arkansas, no? Arkansas was part of the Spanish Crown. Arkansas was explored by Hernando de Soto, and the conqueror, Hernando de Soto, before was the conqueror of Peru. He got the gold from Pizarro, and he wanted to find the El Dorado. El Dorado was a big quest of many of the Spanish explorers, and also of Latin American entrepreneurs, no, like the robber barons of the rainforest in South America. Also, they were looking for El Dorado. No? El Dorado is our natural resources, and then, no, the oil of Mexico, the gold of Peru, and too many resources. No, but the thing is, like with that money of the treasure of the Incas, Hernando de Soto went back to Cuba, to Havana, and he started a new expedition to North America, to those territories of the Mississippi Delta, the Mississippi River. And while I was living there in the early times of this decade, 2010, 2011, there were always news, American news, local news, about the new discovery of the armory of the Spanish conquerors, the new discovery of the crosses, no? Because all these Spanish conquerors built big crosses there in those native territories in the southern part of the United States. But also, what is important for the food, no? Because also Latin American literature is about food, what we eat, no? The pork, the meat, the razorback, what they call it in the south of the United States, no? The United States have barbecue because the Spanish, and indirectly because of the Peruvians, no? So I rediscovered all this mythology of Latin America and that part of the world. Thank you so much, for the invitation.
Many thanks, Enric. Many thanks for this insightful, profound, and analytic input, covering a wide spectrum of Latin American writings. So many thanks for your final input on this. And thank you again for reading from your novella or novel that is getting published.
Thank you, thank you.
Let us have the final input from Sajjad Sharif. Like I mentioned to you, Sajjad Sharif is a poet, but a firm admirer of Latin American literature, to be honest, the world literature in general. Sajjad Sharif, over to you.
Thank you, Kaisar. Actually, it was, let me beg my honest, apology that I had to go to my newspaper to I need to send them to the press. So I needed to go back and I came back again. Actually, what I would like to say that hearing you all, actually, it enhanced my belief again in Latin America, because let me put it in two ways. Like what I felt about Latin America, that whatever actually you see, we always learn from different culture, different people, from other. But Latin America is a sort of other which is reflecting in a way the self we have made. We grew up in the history in our land. Like you see, what we see in Latin America, that whatever goes to Latin America, it evolves in a very unique way. Latin Americans, they can transform everything like their own way of living, everything. Like they produce, they might be influenced by, Marxism or, by communist ideology, but they made their own heroes, like Che Guevara or any other things, any other person. Like, there was communism, but in Latin America, liberation theology emerged. You see, a very unique kind of sociology, a social communist spirit and ideals. And what I see in Latin American poetry, which for me is, I get lesson as a poet, in their poem, what I see that every personal experience, every personal, shy becomes political. Be it a love poem, be it a poem on death, be it a poem on loneliness. I see they can mingle personal feelings with the political feeling. It's like a melting pot. From Gabriela Mistral to, like, last what I read, like Roque Dalton or Otto Castillo, or I'm not, we didn't get the later poems or contemporary poems, but till the last time, the latest poem we get from Latin America, we experienced that they looked at the life wholly, not as a from a marginal perspective, from a very skewed perspective. They grabbed the world, the experience. They let all the experience to be injected in their soul. And when they write poem, they mix all together, from political to personal. They mix together, and we can, from one single poem, we can feel from the person to the society. They cover everything. Language become very manipulative. Language become, the images are very volatile. There is sonorous, sonorous kind of lyric, but there you can hear personal size from personal size to the the very what can I say, like social slogans and everything, but in a very poetic form. So today, whatever I heard from you, it enhanced my experience as a poet. Thanks to all. Thanks to Kaiser. We want to meet again and want to, enhance our poetical, sensibility. Thanks to all.
Exactly. Many thanks for your meaningful contribution to this discussion. This platform of Granthi is designed to make a bridge between the poets and writers of one corners with the poets and writers of other corners. So I'm sure it is kind of a exploring experience for many others who are watching now. Let us come back to Luis Gonzalez Barrios for your final input. We are approaching to the end, actually.
Well, thank you all for the session. It was very inspiring, very informative. It's a pleasure to meet writers from all over the place. I will get into new Indian and Bangladeshi poetry, and Latin American poetry is just already part of my soul. And in terms of I agree with what just mentioned Sajjad Sharif, that there is a big it's still alive. Latin American poetry and culture is like been suppressed for so many centuries, but it never died. And I think it will come back in a different form. And this capacity that he was mentioning to connect like personal experiences and big political structural movements is one of the strengths of this cultural resistant tradition. So that's all from my I was trying to explain how was the reception of the Latin American boom back in Spain in the 90s. Obviously, many things have happened since then. And I agree with some of the people that mentioned women were not included, but I would like to you if I would say that in the 90s, back in my world, this was a conversation. We read women writers, but it was not this idea that the canon was mostly a masculine thing was not part of the debate. Now, obviously, I'm much more aware of that, but I kind of share my, I would say, educación sentimental, my education through these readings. And thank you all for your time, attention, and I hope I can see you soon in any other event.
Many thanks. So many thanks again, Luis. We need to actually, for covering the whole spectrum of Latin American literature, it would be a day-long commitment, actually, I think. And especially, we covered pre-boom, some of us actually mentioned Campendia for boom literature. And it is hard to cover post-boom literature. And then I find, I'm not sure why she's not mentioned in serious literary cycle, especially the Isabel Allende of Love and Shadows. I'm a big fan of a great novel that I read, a post-boom writer, Isabel Allende. But for some reasons, I do not get enough mentioning. Perhaps we could continue this talk afterwards, sometime afterwards. Thank you, Luis, again. Let us come back to Eric Shalanda. If you kindly read some of the poems again before we finish and before we go back to the final comments from other speakers.
Thank you so much, Kaiser. There's so many thoughts that I've had. There are so many notes that I've written that I can't even read. But Sajjad said that imagery is volatile. I'm just going to read some lines that I wrote in the last 15 minutes about Enrique and the video there, half his head disappears. Deconstructed poet. Before the artificial video background, his image breaks up again and again. Once when he entered frame, his dismembered and disconnected arm floated, severed in the frame, hovering like the holy relic of a violently extinguished saint. And then, miraculously, his body reconnected with it. But his hat would shape shift, and part of his head disappeared repeatedly. Maybe not a bad thing for a poet. Surrealism or just bad video effects. In this world, not many can tell the difference anymore. So, would you like Nicanor Para? Oh,
Nicanor
which
Para,
reminds me,
yeah.
with women, I'm so glad you mentioned Isabel Allende.
Isabel
when
Allende, I'm a
people were
big
saying
fan
that.
of her, but for some reason, I do not
But
see
also,
her.
everybody's talking about serious literature,
Yes.
and song is important too. I mean, not so important in literature, a Peruvian singer like Alicia Magina, but she was a beautiful singer, and there were Indios was an important verse, and Bhattacharya, Dr. Bhattacharya mentioned was the first one to mention Quechua, and I'd thought of this before, that with a lot of the South American poets here, there's probably more Arab blood from Andalusia, which is a noble and important and beautiful thing, than there is Indian, South American Indian blood. That's the colonization has been very effective. And the hybrid is like a mirror, the Spanish mirror in a way, and a mixing, which is always absolutely important. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned it, but it is really an important thing. Yeah, Luis.
Just one comment that also you mentioned Cante Hondo.
Yeah.
Lorca in southern Spain, it actually comes from India.
Mm-hmm.
From northern
Absolutely.
India.
Well, he talks about the gypsies, and of course the gypsies.
May I add one point? May I add one point? Luis, you see, Lorca also wrote some, he was also influenced by the Arabian culture, you see. He wrote some Ghazala, and he wrote some, what can I say? So many Ghazalas and so many, that is Ghazal in Arabic, Yeah. Yeah. He was very much influenced by the Arabian culture.
Yeah, he was from
which you get earlier with the troubadour poetry being influenced. And interestingly, with somebody mentioned Ernesto Cardenal, 800 years before, there was Per Cardenal, who, unlike most of the troubadours who wrote love poetry, wrote vicious political poetry, and vicious, although he'd been in the church, under canon of the church, it was the most vicious anti-Catholic Church poetry at the time. And when he was writing the Dominican, the Inquisition was in force, and to write against the Dominicans was something like a death sentence. Yeah, and I wanted to read that thing of Victor Jara, his last poem.
Nicanor Para, please do. Please, Nicanor. Yeah.
Oh no, Nikon. No, what I was thinking was Victor Jara, who was assassinated.
Yeah. Like
Which would you like? Which would you like? It's Rosanna. Rosanna, tell me, which would you like?
Yes.
Which one would you like? The terror of Victor Jara, or something quite sweet by Nicanor?
Nicanor is wonderful.
Okay.
It's humor, beautiful humor.
This
may
be
anti-poem.
Yes.
Anti-poem.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
And Rosanna, I hope sometime to be in touch. I very much enjoyed what you did, and you've got a beautiful voice. But this is perhaps a good way to finish.
Well, Rosanna is going to invite us in Mexico for the festival she organized. So perhaps when the COVID is over, we will be in Mexico.
It's a subversive festival. It's a positive combination with the great field. It's the other field with the people. Yeah. I want to. Okay. I want to be in touch about all of you. I am.
Exactly.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
So,
okay. Quickly, Nicanor para, the last toast. And I'm sorry I can't read it in Spanish. Whether we like it or not, we have 3 choices. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And not even 3. Because as the philosopher says, yesterday is yesterday. It belongs to us only in memory. From the rose already plucked, no more petals can be drawn. The cards to play are only 2, the present and the future. And there aren't even 2, because it's a known fact. The present doesn't exist, except as it edges past and is consumed like youth. In the end, we are only left with tomorrow. I raise my glass to the day that never arrives.
Very tempting, Eric.
But that is all we have at our disposal.
Was that from yesterday's bottle? Great, thank you. Many thanks. Very tempting though. Let us have the final input from Professor Tapodhir Bhattacharjee.
Well, I must say, Enrique and Eric are splendid today. Ravishing. They have really, in cricketing language, they've stumped me out wholly. Wonderful, indeed. So again, thanks to you, Kaisar. Due to you only, I could listen to such wonderful deliberations, such poetic way of finishing things. Well, I'll remember that. Anyway, I don't know how to call it a day or maybe a night. Well, after listening to so many creative poets in this session, I have understood that solitude is no solitude if it can communicate. There cannot be any uncommunicative solitude anywhere. But I'm not philosophizing anymore. Let me go back to my own Arguedas. I remember him. He seems to be invincible, even now, after so many decades. In that famous poem, which I have not read out though, there was an expression like this: take out your binoculars, your best lenses, look if you can. And this is a clarion call. Look if you can. We pretend that we are looking at things, we are looking at literature, we are looking at the essences of poetry. But let us pose this question to ourselves. Are we really looking at the essence, or we are being enamored by the surface structure, as they call in according to the structuralist parlance? Whatever it is, as a person who speaks Bangla language in the remote northeastern part of India, I have, perhaps I can't help it, I have a different sort of perception. But well, we belong to world literature, no doubt about that. But I was wondering, listening to all these poets and their wonderful deliberations, whether we really need Garcia Marquez's, remember Marquez, that famous gypsy, Marquez, who had a mirror. And we required that mirror, which was in possession of Marquez. And remember, there are certain hints, very subtle hints, and that parchment possessed by the timeless Marquez, the gypsy, that parchment was written in Sanskrit. In Aureliana, that famous figure in that in that fiction, or that metafiction, I may say, that he deciphered it. And is it some kind of symbolism in the midst of where Sanskrit was spoken, maybe written in India many centuries ago, many millennium ago? But here, somebody is rediscovering it in as far as a land of Latin America, in Colombia. Is it not something very significant? We are, after all, looking for signifiers in our own way. Particularly poetry is undecipherable if we do not reconstruct the signifiers within. And I remember that parchment once again. As we all know, 100 years of solitude is not only a metafiction, it's a great symbolic disposition of such life which pretends to go on and on, but it can't. Somehow, to quote from Eliot, to remember Eliot, there's a word which ends in a whimper, with that pigtail, you know, that stuff, which is impossible in a real world. But are we not rediscovering our reality? Perhaps through fiction, whether you call it Cortázar, Julio Cortázar, or maybe Carlos Fuentes, whatever we have written in, we have read in English translation, I have confronted this basic question always, in my own way though, and I have tried to understand what does he communicate to me, who I'm so much far removed, as Sajjad was rightly saying. It is looking at the space of the other with a capital O, other. But without that other, can humanity be complete? Can our human endeavors, literary endeavors, our aesthetic endeavors be complete without understanding and deciphering the other? So the comprehension of Latin American literature from wherever we might belong, to different parts of the world we are scattered, but it is our bounden duty. But of course, as I already told, so I'm not repeating, particularly in the context of what Anna was saying. Yes, is there any feminine voice? Is there any possibility of repositing the feminine voices which we might have unknowingly ignored in our search for meaning in different texts, whether it is poetic texts, whether it is fictional texts, or whether it is something else. And I'm not speaking of that tag term, magic realism. No, I'm not speaking of that. In fact, reality is to be rediscovered. Reality, to quote a famous postmodernist writer, a fiction writer, the reality lies at the next door. We are to cross the threshold of that reality, which we have ourselves created with our conceptualization. So let us reconceptualize things and then try to confront Latin American literature with a devotion, which we have to perhaps learn anew. And this is what I have gathered today from some wonderful poetic recitals and some magnificent comments by the poets and the participants here today. So I'm not trying to prolong things. I will only conclude with Marquez's famous lecture, Nobel lecture. I quote only a few lines from there, which I have found out to be the most important one, which is always to be remembered for our own benefit. So I quote, face to face with a reality that overwhelms us, one which over man's perceptions of time must have seemed a utopia. Tellers of tales who, like me, are capable of believing anything, feel entitled to believe it is not yet too late to undertake the creation of a minor utopia, a new and limitless utopia for life, wherein no one can decide for others how they are to die, where love really can be true and happiness possible, where the lineal generations of 100 years of solitude will have at last and forever a second chance on earth. Yes, we require that second chance on earth because our world is, whether you like to remember it or not, is tottering just in the front of our own eyes. And we are perhaps trying to ignore it to the most disagreeable outcome that it will bring with that process of ignoring reality. But reality is that which is completed by hyper reality, call it surreality, whatever you might like to call it this magic realism, whether in which way you may call. And I would conclude with these words, that these magic words of Marquez and all other Latin American stalwarts, they have ignited something new among the Bengali, the language I speak, which is the language of great Rabindranath Tagore and others, in our fiction. And they've tried to reinterpret our own colonial reality, and with that, our own colonized mindset, which is even now continuing, and trying to give a new lease of life to Bangla literature for last 30 or 40 years or so. And that is a great pointer to to the truth, the artistic truth, that how great thinkers, poets, and philosophers, for me, they are all philosophers, poets, playwrights, they are igniting something, a new fire within us. And perhaps in my own literature, that is Bengali literature, my own means it is because I speak in that language, has also benefited much from that. So thank you with these words. Let me call it a day, Kaiser. And thank you all for listening. We belong to the same human family. Thank you.
For this beautiful input, for this insightful and profound input at the end. Like I mentioned, we are actually approaching to the end. So if Rosanna kindly share your final note as shortly as possible, because we are approaching to the end. So Rosanna, perhaps you're coming to Mexico sometime, like I mentioned, and you have so many followers who are the admirer of your poetry, definitely, and also the top you were wearing today. Red top, the lady with the red top, someone wrote he's an admirer of your poetry and your personality, both.
Thank you. I will be so happy to invite all of you. And I want to say thank you to Enrique for talk about Gabriela Mistral. And I want to invite you to read Elena Garro. Okay? Not only Octavio Paz. I invite you to read Olga Orozco, Sylvia Plath, Clarice Lispector, Brazilian. I think we need to know many women, great women, but because I don't hear no many names, women's names. I think it's so important because it's a great literature. Also, I want to say thank you to Anna for mentioning the original voices and the mother language, no? The Mapuche, the Masawa in Mexico, the Nahuatl, Mixtezoque, thunders, and many hundreds of languages. I told everyone have to read the original languages. And I thank you for all of you. I love you, Ahmed. I am so proud.
Well, this is a pleasure. Yeah,
I run this. I run this and thank you. Many thank you. And I keep in touch about all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Rosanna. Thanks for your unconditional love for the Grunty and for myself. Look forward to having you sometime in some of the initiatives. Gaby Sambusiti, a great friend of mine, a great supporter of the Grunty, Saudha, Radha Raman Society. If you kindly share your final note, we actually are at the edge of finish.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I won't say much really, just thank you. It has been fascinating to hear different voices with different perspectives, and many of the writers and academics who were here today, they have many years working and studying and preparing themselves, and they are fascinating, and I'm quite happy to hear voices from Bangladesh as well, talking about Latin America. That's very rich. And so thank you very much. That's it, really.
Thank you. Shamim Shan, if you kindly add your concluding note. If you unmute yourself first, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaisar. Thanks a lot, my honorable guests, for your insightful talk and reading. Absolutely grateful for your time. Many thanks to dear audience.
Shamshan has been frozen. Hello.
Oh.
So let us end with an expectation to have more discussions, more collaborations, and creating more interpretations on literature, world literature, because this is a treasure, global treasure. It can be evolved in some continents, but this is the global treasure. That is the idea of our internationalism, our way of internationalism. So many thanks to Luis Benitez. I'm a great fan of your poetry, Luis, and it is an honor to have you as part of this session. Many thanks who already contributed but left for some reasons actually. Roberto Ichaboren, extremely celebrated veteran poet and academic fiction writer from Uruguay. Many thanks to Carlos, a socialist poet from Chile. And then Rosanna, I love you. I love you. I love your poetry. And let me invite you here in the UK, perhaps at the next the Granthi International Poetry Festival. Many thanks for joining. Many thanks for your meaningful contribution to this session. Thank you, Andre, for this profound input and for reading from your fiction. Thank you, Luis. Many thanks, Eric, again. Many thanks, Gaby Sambusiti, for your support all the way through. Thank you, Sajjad Sharif, for joining. I know Sajjad Sharif is the executive editor, perhaps. Please correct me if I'm wrong, of a leading Bengali daily newspaper, Pratham. So I can see how busy you are, but because of your fascination, a true fascination for Latin American literature, you managed to join and you stayed almost all the way through this discussion. So many thanks for your input. I'm personally grateful for this. Thank you, Shamim Shahan, and look forward to meeting you soon again. Just to let you know, as part of Saudha's activities, some of our audiences are well aware of Saudha, that Saudha Society of Poetry and Indian Music that promotes predominantly Indian classical music, but also global classical, and that includes Western classical. We did with Javanese music, Javanese classical, Japanese classical as well. We did so many collaborations, and on next 2nd of April, Saudha is hosting the celebration of the life and the music of Bore Ghulam Ali Ji, and then many maestros of Indian classical music. That includes Pandit Kumar Ghosh, Ghulam Ali Ji, Ghazal King Ghulam Ali Ji from Pakistan, and many maestros of Indian classical music are joining to pay their tribute to Ustad Bore Ghulam Ali Ji. So please join us there. And also on 3rd of April, Kobir Shumon, although he's well known for his input on modern Bengali music, but he's also equally revered. He should be equally revered for his phenomenal historical input on Bangla Khayal, a wonderful, a noteworthy musicologist, I should say, the one who actually rediscovered Shalil Chaudhary and many other musical figure, Bengali musical figure, in a new way, shedding a new light on their music. So on 3rd of April, I'll have a session with Shumon, Kobi Shumon. So please join us there and have a wonderful rest of the evening. Many thanks for your input. Many thanks to the audiences who supported and shared this session to your timeline. Thank you very much. See you soon again. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.